The ferry's horn bellowed across the harbor. 1 hour until the last departure from Cascade Island. Ethan Cross had 59 minutes to prove he hadn't killed a woman he'd never met, and the only person who could stop him wore a Coast Guard uniform and had already drawn her weapon. The coffee had gone cold an hour ago, but Captain Jade Montgomery still held the mug like it might offer answers. Through the salt-streaked windows of Station Cascade Island, she watched the morning fog roll across the water, thick as wool, obscuring the mainland 8 miles east. The weather report predicted it would burn off by noon. She hoped they were wrong. Fog meant delays. Delays meant fewer judgment calls about who left the island and who stayed. Her radio crackled. "Captain Montgomery, this is dispatch. We've got a situation developing at the harbor master's office. Local PD is requesting Coast Guard presence." Jade set down the mug, her jaw tightening. 3 years stationed on this remote Washington state island, and she'd learned that situations here ranged from drunk fishermen to smuggling operations hidden behind legitimate cargo manifests. The island's year-round population barely cracked 2,000, swelling to 5 in the summer when tourists came for the hiking trails and whale watching. November brought neither whales nor tourists, just gray skies and the kind of quiet that made people do stupid things. Copy that. I'm 10 minutes out. She grabbed her jacket, the dark blue fabric still crisp despite the endless salt air trying to corrode everything on this rock. Her name was stitched above the breast pocket in white thread, each letter a reminder of the oath she'd taken, the lives she was sworn to protect. The drive from the Coast Guard station to the harbor took her down Cascade Island's main artery, a 2-lane road that bisected the island like a crooked spine. Houses dotted the landscape, weathered clapboard structures with gardens fighting against the coastal wind. She passed the elementary school, closed for the weekend, its playground empty except for a crow picking at something near the swings. The harbor master's office sat at the end of Pier 3, a squat building that smelled perpetually of diesel fuel and fish. 3 police cruisers were parked at awkward angles in the gravel lot, their lights painting the fog in lazy circles of red and blue. Jade's chest tightened. 3 cruisers meant serious. The island only had 5 officers total. She found Sheriff Tom Braddock standing outside the office, his considerable belly testing the limits of his uniform shirt. He'd been sheriff for 15 years, long enough to know every family's secrets and wise enough to pretend he didn't. His face was the color of undercooked steak. "Captain Montgomery." He nodded, respect mixing with something else in his expression. Worry, maybe. Or fear. "Sheriff. What's going on?" "Murder." The word hung in the air like smoke. Dr. Helen Morse. Found her body an hour ago in her lab at the research facility. Throat cut, lots of blood. Medical examiner says she's been dead since sometime between midnight and 3 a.m. Jade's mind raced. Helen Morse ran the island's marine research facility, a modest operation funded by a combination of grants and private donations. Jade had met her twice at community events. A woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and sharper questions about ocean acidification. "Any witnesses?" "Better than that. We've got security footage." Braddock pulled out his phone, fingers clumsy on the screen. "This is from the facility's entrance, time-stamped at 1:47 a.m. The video was grainy, black and white, but clear enough. A man in dark clothing approached the building's side entrance. He looked over his shoulder twice before using a keycard to open the door. The camera caught his face for maybe 2 seconds. Angular features, short hair, maybe 6 feet tall. "You recognize him?" Braddock asked. Jade shook her head. "Should I?" "Ethan Cross. Moved to the island 8 months ago, rents a cabin up on the North Ridge. Keeps to himself mostly. Says he's a writer working on a book." Braddock's tone suggested he didn't believe that for a second. "We ran his background. Former Navy EOD. Explosives Ordnance Disposal. Got out 4 years ago after a mission went sideways in Afghanistan. 2 members of his team died. That doesn't make him a killer." "No, but this does." Braddock swiped to another image. "We found Dr. Morse's keycard in his cabin, along with a knife that matches the wound pattern. His boots match prints we found in the blood. And here's the kicker. Dr. Morse made a call to the FBI field office in Seattle yesterday afternoon. Told them she had evidence of something big, something dangerous. Said she'd hand it over in person next week when she was back on the mainland. Jade studied the image of Ethan Cross again. Even through the security footage's poor quality, she could see intelligence in his eyes. And something else. Wariness, maybe. Like a man who'd learned to expect threats from every direction. Where is he now? That's why I called you. Braddock pocketed his phone. He ran. One of my deputies spotted him heading toward the harbor about 20 minutes ago. The last ferry to the mainland departs at noon. That's 53 minutes from now. If he gets on that boat, we've got a jurisdictional nightmare. Seattle PD will have to coordinate with FBI, and you know how that goes. Days of paperwork while our killer walks around free. You're sure he's guilty? Braddock's expression hardened. Evidence doesn't lie, Captain. The only question now is whether you're going to help me stop him from leaving this island. Jade looked past the sheriff toward the ferry terminal. Through the fog, she could just make out the MV Cascade Dream, the island's lifeline to the mainland. It made 3 trips daily during off-season. Morning, noon, and evening. Miss all 3, and you were stuck until tomorrow. The terminal was already showing signs of activity, early passengers queuing with their weekend bags and vehicles. Her radio crackled again. Captain Montgomery, this is Petty Officer Chen at the station. We've received an official request from Island PD to establish a security perimeter around the ferry terminal and conduct passenger screening before boarding. Copy that. I'll coordinate with the sheriff. She clicked off and met Braddock's expectant gaze. I'll post 2 of my people at the terminal. We'll check IDs against the suspect description. But Sheriff, I need to be clear. Coast Guard has jurisdiction over maritime security, not criminal apprehension. If this Ethan Cross tries to board, we can detain him temporarily, but you'll need to make the arrest. Fair enough. Relief washed over Braddock's features. I've got 4 officers converging on the terminal now. Between your people and mine, he won't slip through. Jade wasn't so sure. She'd learned early in her Coast Guard career that desperate people were unpredictable. If Ethan Cross was guilty, he'd know the net was tightening. If he was innocent, and that was a possibility she couldn't quite dismiss despite Braddock's certainty, he'd be running on adrenaline and fear, a combination that made people either freeze or do something spectacularly stupid. She returned to her truck and made the call to station, instructing Petty Officers Chen and Rodriguez to meet her at the terminal with portable screening equipment. Then she sat for a moment, hands on the steering wheel, trying to quiet the unease gnawing at her gut. Something about this didn't sit right. The evidence was too clean, too convenient. A keycard in the suspect's home. A knife that matched the wounds. Security footage that captured his face at just the right angle. In her experience, real crimes were messy, complicated things. This felt staged. But staged by whom? And why? Her phone buzzed, a text from her sister in Portland. Still coming home for Thanksgiving? Mom's driving me crazy asking. Jade typed back, if I can get off this rock. Work stuff. We'll call later. The ferry horn sounded again, a deep mournful note that rolled across the water. 48 minutes until departure. She started the truck and headed for the terminal. The parking lot was more crowded than she'd expected for a November Saturday. She counted at least 30 vehicles. Trucks, sedans, a few motorcycles covered against the weather. Weekend warriors heading back to Seattle after a few days of solitude. Retirees visiting grandchildren on the mainland. The usual mix. Chen and Rodriguez were already setting up a checkpoint at the terminal entrance, their Coast Guard uniforms drawing curious looks from waiting passengers. Chen was checking his equipment with characteristic precision. The 26-year-old took his duties with almost religious seriousness. Rodriguez, older and more weathered, surveyed the crowd with the relaxed vigilance of someone who'd spent 20 years watching for trouble. Captain. Rodriguez nodded as she approached. Sheriff's people are covering the vehicle loading area. We've got foot passengers. What's the protocol? Check every ID against this description. She showed them the security footage image on her phone. White male, approximately 6 feet, short brown hair, athletic build, age 35 to 40. He may be traveling light. probably just a backpack or small bag. If you spot anyone matching, detain and call immediately. Don't try to apprehend alone. Understood. Chen's hand drifted toward his sidearm, an unconscious gesture that made Jade's unease deepen. Chen, this is screening, not combat. We're looking for one man who may or may not be dangerous. Stay alert but don't escalate. Yes, ma'am. She left them to their work and walked toward the terminal building. The ferry was already docked, its loading ramp down. Crew members preparing for the noon departure. Captain Bill Hendricks stood on the deck, clipboard in hand, supervising the early vehicle loading. He'd been running this route for 30 years, knew every sandbar and current between the island and Seattle. Bill. She caught his attention with a wave. He ambled over, his captain's hat slightly askew. Jade, what's this I hear about a murder? Tom Braddock's got half the island in a panic. It's under control. We're just screening passengers before they board. Routine security measure. His eyebrows climbed toward his hat. Routine. Right. And I'm the Queen of England. He lowered his voice. Is there really a killer trying to get on my boat? We're being cautious. That's all I can say. Well, caution away. But I'm departing at noon whether you've caught your man or not. I've got a schedule to keep and passengers with connections to make in Seattle. He softened his tone. I know you're just doing your job, Jade. But so am I. She watched him return to his crew, then turned her attention to the growing crowd. 43 minutes now. Where was Ethan Cross? Was he already here, hidden among the waiting passengers? Or was he still out there somewhere on the island, holed up in a house or barn, hoping to find another way off this rock? Her radio crackled. Captain Montgomery, this is Deputy Foster with Island PD. We've got a possible sighting near the North Beach Trail, about a mile from the terminal. Male matching description, moving fast toward the harbor. Copy that. Keep visual if you can, but don't engage alone. She switched channels. Chen, Rodriguez. Heads up. Suspect may be approaching your position from the North Trail. Stay alert. The next few minutes stretched like taffy. Passengers continued queuing, showing IDs to Chen and Rodriguez, most of them puzzled by the unexpected security theater. A few grumbled about delays. One woman with a screaming toddler looked ready to throw both the child and herself into the ocean. Then she saw him. He emerged from the tree line north of the terminal, moving with the controlled urgency of someone trying not to run but desperate to move fast. He wore a dark jacket, jeans, hiking boots caked with mud. A small backpack hung from one shoulder. Even from 50 yards away, Jade could see the resemblance to the security footage. Same height, same build, same short hair. Ethan Cross had come to catch the ferry. Their eyes met across the parking lot, and in that instant, Jade saw something that made her breath catch. Not guilt or defiance, but raw, desperate fear. The look of a man with nowhere left to run. He bolted. Ethan Cross sprinted between parked cars, his boots hammering the asphalt in a rhythm that matched his thundering heart. Behind him, shouts erupted. Coast Guard, police, civilians who didn't know whether to help or get out of the way. He vaulted over a motorcycle, his backpack catching air, the contents inside rattling with the impact of his landing. 38 minutes until the ferry departed. 38 minutes to find proof he hadn't murdered a woman he'd met exactly twice. He cut left toward the loading dock, where a pickup truck was waiting to drive onto the ferry. If he could just get past the checkpoint, blend in with the vehicles already aboard, but no. 2 Coast Guard officers were converging from his right, hands on their weapons, shouting commands he couldn't process over the roar of blood in his ears. Stop! Coast Guard! Get on the ground! Ethan didn't stop. Stopping meant handcuffs, meant a cell, meant the real killer had all the time in the world to disappear while evidence was manufactured and his life was dismantled piece by piece. He'd seen it happen before. Good people destroyed by systems that valued closure over truth. He changed direction again, this time toward the water's edge, where a series of smaller docks jutted into the harbor like crooked fingers. Fishing boats, pleasure craft, a couple of sailboats waiting out the off-season. His mind calculated angles and distances with the same precision he'd once used to defuse IEDs in Kandahar. Distance to nearest boat: 40 yards. Obstacles: 2 Coast Guard officers, 1 sheriff's deputy, approximately 35 civilian witnesses. Probability of success: vanishingly small. He ran anyway. The first officer reached him as he hit the dock. Young guy, Asian, fit but not combat trained. Ethan could tell from the way he telegraphed his tackle. Ethan sidestepped, used the officer's momentum against him, sent him sprawling into a cleat. Not hard enough to injure seriously, just enough to buy 3 seconds. 3 seconds he used to vault onto a fishing trawler named Lucky Catch. "Hey, get off my boat." An old man in overalls appeared from below deck, brandishing a gaff hook like a medieval weapon. "Sorry." Ethan was already moving toward the stern, where a small tender was tied. He didn't want to steal anything, didn't want to hurt anyone, but the walls were closing in and his options were evaporating like morning fog in sunlight. Then she appeared. The woman from the parking lot, the Coast Guard captain. She stood at the end of the dock, weapon drawn but pointed down, her dark eyes locked on his with an intensity that froze him mid-step. Unlike the others, she wasn't shouting. She just watched him with the calm assessment of someone deciding whether he was a threat or a victim. "Ethan Cross." Her voice carried across the water, steady and clear. "I'm Captain Jade Montgomery, U.S. Coast Guard. I need you to step off that boat and put your hands where I can see them. I didn't kill her." The words burst out before he could stop them. "Dr. Morse, I didn't kill her. This is a setup. Then come in and we'll sort it out. You know that's bullshit." He kept his hands visible, making no sudden moves. Behind her, he could see reinforcements arriving. More deputies, more Coast Guard, a growing crowd of spectators with phones raised to capture his final moments of freedom. "They found evidence in my cabin. Her keycard, a knife, probably my DNA all over the crime scene. Someone's been very thorough." Jade's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Doubt. Curiosity. "If you run, you look guilty. If I stay, I am guilty. The evidence says so." He took a step back toward the tender. "I need time to find the truth. Just a few hours. I can't let you leave this island. Can't or won't." The question hung between them like a challenge. Jade's finger rested along the side of her weapon, not on the trigger, a sign of discipline and control. Her jaw was set, but her eyes continued that strange assessment, cataloging details that didn't fit whatever story she'd been told. "The ferry leaves in 36 minutes, Ethan said quietly. "That's my last chance. After that, I'm trapped here with evidence I didn't plant and a murder I didn't commit. Please." He hated the desperation in his voice, hated begging, but pride was a luxury he couldn't afford. Not now. Not with his entire life hanging in the balance. Jade raised her weapon slightly, sighting down the barrel. "Step off the boat, Mr. Cross. Last warning." Ethan looked at the tender, at the open water beyond, at the ferry that represented his only hope. Then he looked back at Captain Jade Montgomery, trying to read the calculations happening behind those intelligent eyes. "I'm sorry," he said, and jumped into the water. The cold hit him like a physical blow, driving the air from his lungs. November water in the Pacific Northwest hovered somewhere around 50 degrees. Cold enough to kill in less than an hour, cold enough to steal strength and coherent thought within minutes. Ethan surfaced, gasping, already feeling his muscles tighten against the shock. He heard shouting from the dock, saw Jade holstering her weapon and speaking urgently into her radio. Good. She wasn't shooting at him. That was something. He swam. Not toward the open water. That was suicide. But along the dock line, using the boats for cover, making for a section of rocky shoreline about 200 yards east. His clothes dragged at him, the backpack becoming an anchor. He should drop it, should shed every ounce of weight, but the backpack contained his laptop, his phone, the few pieces of evidence he'd managed to gather before the net closed around him. 50 yards. His breathing was already ragged, body temperature dropping. 75. His fingers were going numb, making each stroke clumsy and inefficient. 100. He could hear an engine starting. They were launching a boat to intercept him. He reached the rocks with perhaps 30 seconds to spare. His hands scraped against barnacles as he hauled himself from the water, leaving blood in his wake. No time to care about that. He scrambled up the rocky embankment, boots slipping on wet stone, using roots and outcroppings to pull himself toward the tree line. Behind him, a Coast Guard patrol boat rounded the dock. He saw Jade standing at the bow, binoculars raised, tracking his progress. She said something into her radio, then looked directly at where he crouched in the trees, hidden but somehow certain she could still see him. She lowered the binoculars. For a moment, just a heartbeat, she looked away, directing her crew's attention to a section of shoreline 30 yards south of his actual position. Had she just given him a head start? Ethan didn't wait to find out. He turned and ran into the forest. The island's interior was a maze of old-growth forest, hiking trails, and abandoned logging roads left over from when timber was the primary industry. Ethan knew these woods better than the police did. He'd spent the last 8 months exploring every path and deer trail, partly for the book he was supposedly writing, mostly because solitude and nature was the only thing that quieted the screaming in his head left over from Afghanistan. He ran for 15 minutes, putting distance between himself and the harbor, before his body forced him to stop. He collapsed against a massive cedar tree, shaking violently from cold and adrenaline crash. His teeth chattered so hard he bit his tongue, tasted blood. 31 minutes until the ferry departed. 31 minutes to get dry, get warm, and somehow figure out how to get aboard without being arrested. Impossible. He pulled out his phone, miraculously still functional despite the dunking, thanks to a waterproof case he'd invested in after one too many hiking mishaps. No signal this deep in the trees, but he didn't need signal. He needed information. The phone contained everything he'd discovered in the 6 hours since finding Dr. Morse's body. He'd been walking home from a sleepless night at the island's 24-hour diner. Insomnia was another gift from his military service, when he'd seen the lights on at the research facility. Dr. Morse was usually an early riser, but 5 a.m. seemed excessive even for her. Something had pulled him toward the building, some instinct honed by years of looking for things that didn't belong. The side door had been propped open with a rock, security cameras disabled. And inside, in the main laboratory, Dr. Helen Morse lay in a spreading pool of blood, her throat cut with surgical precision. Ethan had combat medical training. He'd checked for a pulse, already knowing he wouldn't find one. She'd been dead for hours, body temperature already dropping toward ambient. And scattered around her, as if knocked from her desk during a struggle, were printouts of data. Chemical analysis, water samples, GPS coordinates. He'd taken photos with his phone. All of them. Because even in that moment, some part of his brain understood that this was bigger than a murder. Dr. Morse had been investigating something, had found something important enough to kill for. Then he'd made his mistake. He'd called 911. The deputies had arrived within 10 minutes. They'd taken his statement, his fingerprints for elimination purposes, told him to stay available for follow-up questions. He'd gone home, still processing what he'd seen, trying to understand what could drive someone to such violence. 2 hours later, they'd come to arrest him. Now, shivering against the cedar tree, Ethan pulled up the photos he'd taken. The data printouts were partially obscured by blood, but he could make out enough to see patterns. Water samples from various locations around the island, all showing elevated levels of something labeled Compound X7. Chemical formulas that meant nothing to him. And a handwritten note in Dr. Morse's precise script. Call FBI. Mainland facility compromised. Cannot trust local authorities. Cannot trust local authorities. The words echoed in his mind. Dr. Morse had known something was wrong, had known she couldn't rely on the island police. And now she was dead, and Ethan was being framed with evidence so perfect it might as well have come with a bow. His phone buzzed, a text message that must have been queued, waiting for a brief window of signal. Unknown number. Stop running. You're making it worse. Ethan stared at the message. Who? The killer. Someone trying to help? He typed back. Who is this? No response. The signal had already faded. 27 minutes until the ferry departed. He forced himself to his feet, forced his cold stiffened legs to move. There was an old maintenance shed about half a mile north, left over from the logging days. If it was still standing, it might have tarps or canvas he could use to get warm. And from there, he could work his way back toward the harbor, find some way to sneak aboard the ferry. The woods were silent except for his labored breathing and the drip of water from the canopy. No birds sang. No squirrels chattered. It felt like the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting to see how this would play out. He'd almost reached the shed when he heard the helicopter. The sound started as a distant thump, barely audible over the whisper of wind through trees. Then it grew, became unmistakable, rotor blades cutting air, the mechanical thunder of a search and rescue bird. Or in this case, search and apprehend. Ethan pressed himself against a tree trunk, looking up through the canopy. There, a flash of orange and white. Coast Guard colors. They were doing an aerial search, probably equipped with thermal imaging that would light him up like a Christmas tree once they got close enough. He ran again, this time without direction or plan, just desperate motion to generate heat and stay ahead of the eye in the sky. His clothes were still wet, sapping warmth faster than his body could generate it. His fingers had gone from numb to painful, the first stage of hypothermia setting in. The helicopter swung north, its search pattern methodical and thorough. They'd find him. It was just a matter of time. Unless. The creek. He remembered a creek that ran through the section of forest, cold and fast with runoff from higher elevations. Cold water would mask his heat signature, at least temporarily. It was a terrible idea. Getting wetter when he was already hypothermic, but it was the only idea he had. He found the creek and waded in. The water reached his thighs, flowing so cold it felt like being stabbed with 1,000 tiny knives. He moved downstream toward the harbor, using the water to cover his thermal signature and his tracks. 23 minutes. The helicopter passed overhead, so close he could see the sensor pod swiveling beneath its belly. He ducked under an overhanging bank, pressing himself into the mud and roots, becoming part of the landscape. The helicopter hovered, searching, then moved on. Ethan waited 5 minutes, an eternity in his current state, before climbing from the creek. He couldn't feel his legs anymore. His vision had started to narrow at the edges, a sure sign that his core temperature was dropping to dangerous levels. The shed appeared through the trees like a mirage. It was smaller than he remembered, barely more than a lean-to, but the roof was mostly intact and someone had left an old tarp folded in the corner. Ethan stripped off his jacket and shirt, used the tarp to dry himself as much as possible, then wrapped it around his torso. Not ideal, not even close to warm, but better than wearing wet clothes. His phone showed 19 minutes until ferry departure. He pulled up the photos again, forcing his shaking hands to zoom in on details. The GPS coordinates in Dr. Morse's data. Where were those locations? He opened his mapping app, plotted the points. They formed a ring around the island's southern peninsula, near where the old ferry terminal used to operate before they'd built the new one. That section of coastline was mostly private property now, owned by Cascade Industries, the island's largest employer. They ran some kind of manufacturing facility there, something to do with marine equipment and industrial chemicals. Compound X7 in the water samples. A contaminated mainland facility. The need to contact the FBI. The pieces started connecting in Ethan's mind, forming a picture he didn't want to see. Environmental crime. Illegal dumping. Something big enough to murder for, big enough to frame an outsider and hope the evidence was so compelling nobody would look deeper. But why him? What made Ethan cross the perfect patsy? His phone buzzed again. Another text from the unknown number. Ferry terminal. North loading dock. 11:58. Come alone. Ethan stared at the message. A trap. Probably. But what choice did he have? The ferry was his only way off the island, and he had 16 minutes to either get aboard or spend the rest of his life in prison for a crime he didn't commit. He put his wet jacket back on, shouldered his backpack, and headed toward the harbor. Captain Jade Montgomery stood in the ferry terminal security office, watching multiple screens show the ongoing search. Helicopter feed. Dock cameras. Body cams from deputies searching the woods. Every angle covered, every exit blocked. Ethan Cross had maybe a 5% chance of reaching the ferry, and 0% chance of boarding undetected. So why did she feel like she was missing something? Captain. Petty Officer Rodriguez appeared in the doorway. Sheriff Braddock wants to know if we're still holding the ferry or letting it depart on schedule. On schedule. She checked her watch. 17 minutes. We've screened every passenger. Cross isn't aboard, and there's no way he's getting past our checkpoints. Rodriguez nodded and left. Jade turned back to the screens, her unease growing. She'd been thinking about Ethan Cross's words on the dock. The desperation in his voice when he'd said someone had been very thorough with the evidence. The way he'd jumped into 50-degree water rather than surrender. Not the action of someone confident in the justice system, but not necessarily the action of a guilty man either. Her phone rang. Sheriff Braddock. Captain, we've got him cornered in the North Woods. Helicopters spotted him near the old logging shed. I'm moving units to intercept. Copy that. She paused. Sheriff, can I ask you something? This evidence you found, the keycard, the knife, the footprints, it all came together pretty fast. That's what I said. Open and shut case. Maybe too fast. Too open and shut. Silence on the line. Then. What are you suggesting, Captain? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm asking questions. She chose her words carefully. Dr. Morse told the FBI she had evidence of something big. Something dangerous. What if her murder wasn't personal? What if Cross is telling the truth about being framed? Then he should turn himself in and let the system work. The system works when evidence is reliable. When it's not compromised. She watched the helicopter feed, saw deputies moving through the forest in formation. I'd like to review the crime scene photos, the evidence logs, before we make the arrest official. Another pause. Longer this time. That's not really your jurisdiction, Captain. No, but maritime security is. And if there's any chance this murder connects to something bigger, smuggling, environmental crime, anything that falls under Coast Guard authority, I need to know. I'll send you the files. Braddock's tone had cooled considerably. But Captain Montgomery, don't let sympathy cloud your judgment. That man is dangerous, and he's running out of places to hide. The call ended. Jade stood alone in the security office, surrounded by screens showing a manhunt for a man who might be innocent. 14 minutes until the ferry departed. She made a decision that would either save a life or destroy her career. Ethan reached the edge of the tree line overlooking the ferry terminal with 8 minutes to spare. His body had moved beyond shivering into a dangerous stillness. His core temperature low enough that his thinking felt sluggish, disconnected. He crouched behind a maintenance shed, watching the organized chaos of the final boarding process. The ferry sat at the dock like a patient beast, its loading ramp down, vehicles queuing in orderly lines. He counted at least 4 sheriff's deputies positioned around the terminal. Another 2 Coast Guard officers at the pedestrian checkpoint. Every person boarding was being scrutinized, every face compared against what he assumed was his photo. The north loading dock, where the mysterious text had told him to go, was partially obscured by a stack of shipping containers waiting for transport. It was used primarily for cargo and maintenance equipment, currently empty except for a single Coast Guard truck parked at an odd angle. 7 minutes. Ethan's training kicked in, overriding the hypothermia trying to shut down his higher functions. Assess the situation. Identify the objective. Plan the approach. Execute with precision. The same mental checklist he'd used 100 times in Afghanistan when the wrong step meant explosive death. The objective, reach the ferry without being spotted. The approach, use the shipping containers for cover. Move during moments of distraction. Execution, trust that whoever sent that text message had a reason, had a plan, or at least had created an opportunity he could exploit. He waited for a diesel truck to rumble past, using its noise to cover his movement. 30 seconds across open ground to the first container. He made it, pressed his back against the cold metal, listening for shouts or running footsteps. Nothing. 6 minutes. The next container was 10 feet away. He slipped between them, moving like a ghost, every sense hyper-alert despite his body's failing systems. His fingers were too numb to feel the metal he gripped for balance. His legs trembled with each step. The Coast Guard truck sat 20 feet ahead, driver's door slightly ajar. He could see the north loading dock beyond it, and beyond that, a small service entrance to the ferry that crew used for equipment access. Not monitored by the main cameras. Not guarded because who would be stupid enough to try boarding that way? 5 minutes. Ethan took a breath and sprinted for the truck. He reached it without alarm, dove between the vehicle and the containers, landing hard on his shoulder. Pain flared. Good. Pain meant he wasn't completely hypothermic yet. He lay still, listening to his heartbeat thunder in his ears. Anyone see that? The voice came from nearby, young and male. One of the deputies. Ethan's hand instinctively went to his belt, searching for a weapon he didn't have. He was unarmed, exhausted, and cornered. If they found him now. See what? Another voice, older, bored. Jenkins, you're jumping at shadows. Nobody's getting past us. I just thought I saw movement by those containers. You want to check it out? Be my guest. I'm staying where it's warm. Footsteps approached. Ethan pressed himself against the truck's undercarriage, making himself as small as possible. The deputy's boots appeared in his line of sight, black leather polished to parade ground shine. They stopped 3 feet from his hiding spot. 4 minutes. The deputy's radio crackled. All units. This is Braddock. Helicopter has visual on suspect in the North Woods, approximately 1 mile from terminal. Converge on those coordinates. The boots turned and walked away at a jog. Ethan heard car doors slamming, engines starting. The manhunt was shifting away from the terminal, pulled toward the false lead in the woods. Except he wasn't in the woods. He was right here, which meant someone had deliberately fed them wrong information. 3 minutes. Ethan crawled from beneath the truck and looked toward the ferry. The service entrance was now clear, the main attention focused on the standard boarding areas. This was his chance. Possibly his only chance. He was halfway to the entrance when he heard her voice. Mr. Cross. Stop. Captain Jade Montgomery stepped from behind a shipping container, her service weapon drawn but pointed at the ground. She wore her uniform jacket over what looked like a civilian sweater, her hair pulled back in a practical bun. Her dark eyes were unreadable in the shadow of the containers. Ethan froze. His muscles tensed to run, but there was nowhere to go. Behind him, deputies. Ahead, the ferry. Between them, this woman who held his fate in her hands. You sent the texts, he said. Not a question. I sent them. She holstered her weapon in a smooth motion that suggested she'd never really intended to use it. You have 2 minutes to get aboard that ferry. The service entrance leads to a maintenance corridor. Follow it to the vehicle deck. Hide among the cargo until we're underway. Once we're in maritime jurisdiction, away from the island, Sheriff Braddock loses authority. Ethan stared at her, trying to process what he was hearing. You're helping me escape. I'm making a judgment call based on insufficient evidence and a gut feeling that something about this case stinks. She stepped closer, her expression intense. Dr. Morse called the FBI yesterday. She told them she couldn't trust local authorities. Those were her exact words. That makes me wonder who she was afraid of and why. You could lose your career for this. I could lose my career for a lot of things. I choose to risk it for the ones that matter. She pulled a small waterproof bag from her jacket. Dry clothes. They'll be too small, but better than hypothermia. There's also a blanket, hand warmers, and a thermos of coffee. Get warm before you do anything else. He took the bag, his numb fingers clumsy. Why are you doing this? Because I've spent 3 years on this island watching how the system works, and sometimes it doesn't work the way it should. She glanced toward the ferry. 1 minute. Go. Come with me. The words surprised him even as he said them. If you're right about this being bigger than a simple murder, you're in danger too. I'm Coast Guard. I can handle myself. But something flickered in her expression. uncertainty, or maybe the first hint of fear. Besides, someone needs to stay behind and figure out what Dr. Morse discovered. Those water samples she collected, the GPS coordinates in her data. I'm going to find out what was at those locations. Cascade Industries. Ethan pulled out his phone, showed her the photos he'd taken. The coordinates form a ring around their facility on the South Peninsula. Whatever she found, it connects to them. Jade studied the images, her jaw tightening. Cascade Industries employs half this island. They've got contracts with the military, government agencies. If they're involved in something illegal. The ferry's horn blasted. 30 seconds. Go. She pushed him toward the service entrance. There's a hotel in Seattle called the Cascadia Inn, near Pike Place Market. I'll meet you there tomorrow at noon if I can get away. If I don't show, assume I'm compromised and get those photos to the FBI. Jade, Captain Montgomery. And that's an order, Mr. Cross. But she almost smiled, just a ghost of expression that softened her. Features. Now move before I change my mind and arrest you properly. Ethan ran for the service entrance. The door was unlocked, another gift from his unlikely ally. He slipped inside, into a narrow corridor that smelled of diesel and salt water. Behind him, he heard Jade's voice on her radio, calm and professional, reporting no sign of the suspect in the terminal area. The ferry's engines thrummed to life, vibration traveling through the deck plates. Ethan followed the corridor to a cargo area filled with pallets and containers. He found a space between two cargo nets and collapsed, pulling on the dry clothes Jade had provided with shaking hands. The shirt and pants were indeed too small, clearly borrowed from someone else at the Coast Guard station, but they were dry and warm and felt like salvation. He wrapped himself in a blanket, cracked open the hand warmers, and felt the first genuine warmth in hours spread across his chest. The coffee was still hot, sweet with sugar and cream. He drank it slowly, feeling his core temperature stabilize, his thinking clear. The ferry pulled away from the dock with a deep rumble. Through a porthole, Ethan could see the island receding, could see the flashing lights of sheriff's vehicles still searching the woods for a man who was already gone. He'd escaped. Against impossible odds, with help from an unexpected source, he'd escaped. Now came the hard part. Proving his innocence before the people who'd framed him realized he was still free. Jade watched the ferry disappear into the afternoon fog, her heart pounding with what she'd just done. She'd aided a fugitive, obstructed justice, violated her oath to uphold the law. Everything she'd worked for, her career, her reputation, her integrity, now hung by a thread. And yet, watching that ferry slip away felt more right than anything she'd done in years. Her radio crackled. Captain Montgomery, this is Braddock. We lost him in the woods. Helicopter search came up empty. Is the ferry secure? She keyed the radio, kept her voice steady. Ferry departed on schedule. All passengers screened. No sign of Cross. Damn it. Frustration crackled through the transmission. He's still on the island then. Probably holed up somewhere waiting for the evening ferry. I'm posting units at the terminal until we catch him. Copy that, Sheriff. Coast Guard will maintain security presence. She ended the transmission and walked toward her truck, forcing herself to move normally, to show no sign of the adrenaline screaming through her veins. She'd just burned her bridges. If anyone discovered what she'd done. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Captain Montgomery. We need to talk. About Dr. Morse. About Ethan Cross. About what happens next. Come alone to the Cascade Industries facility. South entrance. 1 hour. Jade stared at the message. A trap. Almost certainly. But also possibly the only way to get answers about what was really happening on this island. She thought about Dr. Morse's final words. Cannot trust local authorities. She thought about Ethan Cross, jumping into freezing water rather than surrender to a system he didn't trust. She thought about her own oath, her duty, and where those things intersected with truth and justice. Then she texted back, I'll be there. The Cascade Industries facility sprawled across 50 acres of the island's southern peninsula, a maze of buildings and storage tanks connected by access roads and security fences. Jade had driven past it hundreds of times but had never been inside. It wasn't her jurisdiction, wasn't her concern. The company paid its taxes, employed local workers, and maintained a pristine public image as a responsible corporate citizen. Now, approaching the south entrance as afternoon shadows lengthened, she wondered how much of that image was true and how much was carefully constructed fiction. The gate was open. No guards visible. No security cameras that she could spot. Just an empty guardhouse and a service road leading deeper into the facility. Every instinct screamed trap, but she drove forward anyway, her hand resting on her service weapon. The road wound between storage tanks and processing buildings before opening onto a small parking area overlooking the water. A single car sat there, a black sedan with government plates. Not local government. Federal. Jade parked and got out, scanning the area. The facility was eerily quiet, just the sound of water lapping against the rocky shore and the distant cry of gulls. She walked toward the water's edge, where a man in a dark suit stood looking out at the ocean. Captain Montgomery. He turned, showing her a badge. Special Agent Marcus Webb, FBI Seattle Field Office. Thank you for coming. Jade kept her hand near her weapon. You're the one who texted me. I am. I apologize for the cloak and dagger approach, but circumstances require discretion. He was in his 50s, with iron gray hair and the weathered face of someone who'd spent too many years chasing criminals. I assume you know why I'm here. Dr. Helen Morse contacted your office yesterday. She did. Said she had evidence of criminal activity that required federal investigation. She was scheduled to meet with me next week in Seattle. His expression darkened. Obviously, that meeting won't be happening now. What was she investigating? Webb gestured toward the facility behind them. Cascade Industries has been dumping industrial waste into the ocean for at least 2 years. Not just any waste. Highly toxic chemical compounds that they're supposed to be disposing of through approved channels. Instead, they've been pumping it directly into the water at night, using their legitimate business operations as cover. Jade felt her stomach drop. The water samples in Dr. Morse's data. Exactly. She'd been monitoring ocean health around the island as part of her research. Started noticing anomalies 6 months ago. Dead marine life, toxic algae blooms, chemical signatures that shouldn't be present. She spent months documenting it, building a case. He pulled out a tablet, showed her images. This is what the ocean floor looks like near their outflow pipe. Everything's dead for 100 yards in every direction. The images showed a wasteland of bleached coral and skeletal fish, a dead zone in what should have been thriving marine habitat. Jade had grown up respecting the ocean, had dedicated her career to protecting it. Seeing this felt like witnessing a murder. Why wasn't she working with local authorities? Because Cascade Industries owns local authorities. Webb's voice was bitter. They've been making substantial donations to Sheriff Braddock's re-election campaigns for years. The mayor, the town council, half the business owners on this island, they're all financially tied to Cascade. Dr. Morse knew she couldn't trust anyone local with this information. So they killed her. And framed an outsider for it. Ethan Cross was perfect. No connections to the island, military background that could be spun as violent, and enough PTSD that nobody would question him cracking under pressure. Webb fixed her with a hard stare. Except he didn't crack. He ran. And somehow managed to evade an island-wide manhunt. I'm curious how he managed that. Jade kept her expression neutral. I'm curious why you're telling me this instead of arresting the people responsible. Because I don't have enough evidence yet. Dr. Morse's research was thorough, but she was killed before she could deliver all of it to me. Her lab was ransacked after the murder. Data deleted, samples destroyed. Without her testimony and complete documentation, Cascade Industries can claim the contamination came from natural sources or another facility. He stepped closer. I need help, Captain. Someone on the inside who can gather evidence without tipping off the people we're investigating. You want me to spy on the sheriff. I want you to do your job. Protecting maritime resources is your jurisdiction, isn't it? This is environmental crime on a massive scale. He pulled out a file folder, handed it to her. Everything I have so far. Water quality reports, financial records showing Cascade's payments to local officials, witness statements from workers who've seen things they shouldn't have. It's not enough for prosecution, but it's enough to start asking questions. Jade opened the folder, scanning documents that detailed a conspiracy of corruption and environmental destruction. Her hands trembled slightly. If I do this, if I start investigating, they'll know. The same people who killed Dr. Morse will come after you. Yes. Webb's tone softened. I won't lie to you, Captain. This is dangerous. But you've already chosen a side, haven't you? When you helped Ethan Cross escape. She looked up sharply. I don't know what you're talking about. Please. I've been doing this for 30 years. I know what an inside job looks like. He almost smiled. For what it's worth, I think you made the right call. Cross is innocent, and keeping him free means the real killers have to worry about him exposing them. It splits their attention, makes them careless. He's on the mainland now. Safe. Is he? Webb's smile faded. Cascade Industries has resources beyond this island, Captain. They have lawyers, private security, connections in law enforcement. Cross being on the ferry doesn't mean he's safe. It means the hunting ground just got bigger. Jade's phone buzzed. A text from a blocked number. Thank you for the help. I won't forget it. EC. She showed it to Webb. He made it to Seattle. For now. But Captain, you need to understand something. Webb's voice was grave. The people we're dealing with have killed once to protect their secret. They won't hesitate to kill again. Not Dr. Morse, not Ethan Cross, and not you if they figure out you're working against them. Then we'd better work fast. Jade closed the folder and headed for her truck. I'll start gathering evidence. But Agent Webb, if anything happens to me, if I disappear or die in a convenient accident, make sure someone knows the truth. You have my word. She drove away from the facility, the folder hidden under her seat, her mind racing with everything she'd learned. The island she'd called home for 3 years, the people she'd worked alongside, the system she'd trusted. All of it was rotten beneath the surface. And she'd just committed herself to tearing it all down. Her phone rang. Petty Officer Chen. Captain, we've got a problem at the station. Someone broke in while we were all at the ferry terminal. Files scattered, computers accessed. They were looking for something. I'm on my way. Jade hung up and pressed harder on the accelerator. They were already moving against her. The question now was whether she could move faster. The MV Cascade Dream cut through gray water toward the Seattle skyline, its engines maintaining a steady rhythm that Ethan felt through the deck plates. He remained hidden in the cargo hold for the first hour of the journey, watching through a porthole as the island diminished to a dark smudge on the horizon. Only when they'd cleared the halfway point, beyond any reasonable chance of turning back, did he emerge from his hiding spot. The vehicle deck was largely empty now, just a few trucks secured with chains and a handful of motorcycles covered against the salt spray. Ethan moved carefully toward the stairwell leading to the passenger decks, every nerve alert for signs of pursuit. Jade had said he'd be safe once they left island jurisdiction, but safe was a relative term. If someone had called ahead, if the ferry crew had been alerted. He made it to the passenger deck without incident. The main cabin was perhaps a third full, mostly locals returning from weekend visits, a few tourists who'd mistimed the season. Ethan found a seat near the stern, away from the crowd, and tried to look like just another passenger. His phone had signal now. 3 bars enough to function. He pulled up the photos from Dr. Morse's lab, studied them with fresh eyes now that he wasn't running for his life. The chemical formulas meant nothing to him, but the GPS coordinates were clear enough. He opened a satellite map, zoomed in on the Cascade Industries facility. The building complex was larger than he'd realized, sprawling across the southern peninsula with multiple structures and storage tanks. But one feature caught his attention, a pipe extending from the main facility directly into the ocean. It was partially camouflaged, barely visible in the satellite imagery, but once he knew to look for it, it was obvious. An outflow pipe. for disposing of waste into the water. Ethan felt pieces clicking together. Environmental crime. Illegal dumping. Dr. Morse had documented it, probably planned to blow the whistle, and been killed before she could talk. And he'd been framed because he was convenient, an outsider with no connections, a veteran with PTSD who could be painted as unstable. His hands clenched around the phone. 4 years ago, he'd survived an IED blast that killed 2 members of his EOD team. He'd spent 18 months in physical therapy learning to walk without a limp, another year in counseling learning to sleep without nightmares. He'd moved to Cascade Island specifically because it was quiet, isolated, a place where he could heal without people constantly asking if he was okay. And someone had weaponized that healing against him, had turned his trauma into evidence of guilt. The anger was clean and cold, like January water. It focused him, sharpened his thinking. He wasn't running anymore. He was hunting. His phone buzzed with a new text. Unknown number. Mr. Cross, this is Agent Webb, FBI. Captain Montgomery gave me your number. We need to meet. Seattle field office, or someplace more discreet if you prefer. We have information about Dr. Morse's murder. Ethan stared at the message. The FBI. The same agency Dr. Morse had contacted before her death. Could he trust them? Could he trust anyone at this point? He typed back, "How do I know you're really FBI?" The response came within seconds. "You don't. But Captain Montgomery trusts me, and she risked everything to get you off that island. That should count for something. Pike Place Market, near the Rachel Pig statue, 6 p.m. I'll be wearing a gray suit and reading the Seattle Times. Come alone." Ethan checked his watch. The ferry would dock around 4 p.m. That gave him 2 hours to disappear into Seattle, make sure he wasn't being followed, and decide whether this was legitimate or an elaborate trap. The ferry's PA system crackled to life. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're approximately 30 minutes from Seattle. All passengers with vehicles should return to the car deck. Walk-on passengers may disembark through the main terminal." Ethan pocketed his phone and moved toward the forward observation deck. Through the windows, he could see the Seattle skyline emerging from the mist. The Space Needle, the downtown towers, the sprawl of a city that represented both safety and danger. Out there, he could disappear. But out there so could the people hunting him. A voice behind him. "Rough crossing." Ethan turned to find an elderly woman bundling herself against the wind, her white hair escaping from beneath a knit cap. She had the weathered face of someone who'd spent her life near the ocean. "Excuse me. You look like someone who's had a rough crossing. Course, in November they're all rough." She smiled, showing teeth too perfect to be original. "First time on the ferry?" "No, He stopped himself. "Don't engage. Don't be memorable. I'm just tired. Aren't we all?" She gazed out at the approaching city. "I've been riding this ferry for 40 years. Watched Seattle grow from a modest port town into whatever it is now. Change isn't always progress, you know. Sometimes things get worse before they get better." Ethan nodded, hoping she'd take the hint and leave him alone. Instead, she continued, "I heard there was excitement on the island today. Murder. Manhunt. Sheriff Braddock hasn't had this much activity since the Anderson boy stole that fishing boat back in '09. She glanced at him sideways. "You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" His pulse spiked. "No. I was just visiting for the weekend." The sound was non-committal. "Well, whoever that young man is they're looking for, I hope he's innocent. Because if he is, and they catch him anyway, that's the real crime." She patted his arm and walked away, leaving Ethan standing at the rail with his heart pounding. Had she recognized him? Was she warning him or threatening him, or just making conversation? The ferry horn announced their arrival. Seattle's waterfront appeared through the mist, tourists on the pier, restaurants with windows overlooking the water, the organized chaos of a working harbor. Ethan descended to the main deck with the other walk-on passengers, keeping his head down, blending into the crowd. The terminal was busy with afternoon traffic. He moved through it quickly, out into the Seattle drizzle, losing himself in the flow of pedestrians heading toward downtown. No one followed. No one shouted. He was just another face in the crowd. For now. Jade stood in the Coast Guard Station's administrative office, surveying the damage. File cabinets hung open, their contents scattered across the floor. Her desk had been ransacked, drawers emptied, her computer showing signs of forced access. Whoever had done this hadn't bothered with subtlety. They'd torn through the place like a hurricane. They got into the evidence locker too, Chin reported, his young face pale. All the photos from this morning's incident at the harbor, gone. Video footage from our body cams, erased. What about the server backups? Wiped. Professionally, from what I can tell. This wasn't some random break-in, Captain. They knew exactly what they were looking for and how to find it. Jade's jaw tightened. Evidence of Ethan Cross's escape, any record that might contradict the official story. They were covering their tracks, eliminating anything that didn't fit the narrative they'd constructed. Her phone rang. Sheriff Braddock. Captain Montgomery, I just heard about the break-in at your station. Terrible business. We'll send a forensics team over immediately. That won't be necessary, Sheriff. We can handle our own investigation. I insist. We're all on the same team here, working toward the same goal, justice for Dr. Morse. His voice carried an edge beneath the politeness. Unless there's some reason you don't want us examining your facility? The threat was clear. Refuse cooperation, and he'd wonder why. Wonder, investigate, potentially discover what she'd done. Of course, Sheriff. Any assistance is appreciated. She kept her voice neutral. Though I should mention, we've already documented the scene. I'll have my report ready by end of day. Excellent. Oh, and Captain, I heard an interesting rumor. Someone saw suspicious activity near the ferry terminal right before departure. Near the north loading dock. Pause. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you? Jade's hand tightened on the phone. I was supervising security during the boarding process, Sheriff. If there was suspicious activity, I would have reported it. Of course you would have. Just checking. Another pause, longer this time. Be careful out there, Captain. We've got a killer on the loose, and everyone's a potential target. Even Coast Guard officers who ask too many questions. The call ended. Jade stood motionless, processing the barely veiled threat. Braddock suspected her. Might not have proof yet, but he suspected, which meant she was running out of time. Rodriguez appeared in the doorway. Captain, there's someone here to see you. Says it's urgent. She won't give her name. Where is she? Interview room. And Captain. She's scared. Really scared. Jade followed Rodriguez to the small interview room they used for witness statements. A woman sat at the table, mid-30s, wearing a Cascade Industries uniform with a name tag that read, Kelly. Her hands trembled as she gripped a styrofoam cup of coffee. I'm Captain Montgomery. You wanted to see me. The woman looked up, her eyes red from crying. I work at Cascade Industries. In the main office. I shouldn't be here, I could lose my job, but I can't. I can't stay quiet anymore. Jade sat across from her, keeping her voice gentle. It's okay. Whatever you tell me stays confidential. Dr. Morse was murdered because of what she knew. About the dumping the chemicals. I helped process the disposal reports, the ones we filed with the EPA. They were all falsified. We weren't disposing of waste properly. We were just dumping it in the ocean. The words tumbled out in a rush. I tried to tell my supervisor, tried to say we needed to fix the reports, but he said it was none of my business. Said to keep my mouth shut if I wanted to keep my job. Do you have any proof? Documents, records. I made copies. Before they could delete everything after Dr. Morse died. Kelly pulled a USB drive from her pocket, slid it across the table. It's all here. False reports, internal memos about the dumping, even emails discussing how to cover it up. I thought about giving it to the sheriff, but you don't trust him. Dr. Morse didn't trust him. She told me that about 2 weeks ago when she came to the facility for a surprise inspection. Said if anything happened to her, I should go to the FBI or the Coast Guard, not local police. Kelly's voice broke. I was too scared then. But after they killed her, after they framed that innocent man, I have a daughter, Captain. I need to be able to look her in the eye and say I did the right thing. Jade picked up the USB drive, felt its weight in her palm. Evidence. Real, documented evidence of corporate crime and conspiracy. Kelly, you did the right thing. But you need to understand, this makes you a target. The people who killed Dr. Morse won't hesitate to come after you too. I know. The woman stood, her decision made. That's why I'm leaving. Taking my daughter and driving to my sister's place in Portland tonight. I'll stay there until this is over, until they're arrested. She headed for the door, then turned back. Captain. That man they're looking for, Ethan Cross. He really didn't do it. No. He didn't. Then I hope he makes it. I hope he stays free long enough to see justice done. After Kelly left, Jade sat alone in the interview room, staring at the USB drive. This was it. The evidence that could bring down Cascade Industries, expose the corruption, prove Ethan's innocence. But it also painted a target on her back that wouldn't fade until this was over. She inserted the drive into her laptop, began scanning the files. Hundreds of documents, spreadsheets showing disposal records that didn't match actual procedures, emails between company executives discussing the Morse problem weeks before she was murdered. And one file marked priority that made Jade's blood run cold. It was a list. Names, addresses, photographs, people who'd asked questions about Cascade Industries, environmental activists, journalists, a graduate student writing a thesis on ocean contamination. And at the bottom of the list, added yesterday, Captain Jade Montgomery, U.S. Coast Guard. Her photo stared back at her from the screen. Below it, a single word, monitoring. They already knew. Had known even before she'd helped Ethan escape. They'd been watching her, waiting to see if she'd become a problem. Well, now she had. Jade copied the files to multiple locations. Cloud storage, a second USB drive, her personal phone. Then she called Agent Webb. I have the evidence you need. All of it. But we have a problem, they know I'm involved. I'm on their list. Webb's voice was grim. How bad? Bad enough that I need to get off this island tonight. Can you provide protection? I can meet you on the mainland with a team. But Captain, if you leave now, they'll know you're running. It might spook them into destroying more evidence or going after Cross directly. Then what do you suggest? Stay visible. Act normal. Give me 24 hours to position my team and prepare for arrests. Can you do that? Jade looked around the ransacked office, thought about the list with her name on it, imagined what had happened to Dr. Morse in her final moments. 24 hours felt like an eternity. I can do it, she said. But Agent Webb, if I end up dead in that time, make sure my evidence still gets used. Promise me. You have my word. And Captain, watch your back. Trust no one on that island. She ended the call and sat in the darkening office, listening to the sound of the ocean outside. Somewhere across that water, Ethan Cross was meeting with Webb, comparing notes, building the case that would either save them both or get them killed. Jade pulled out her service weapon, checked the magazine, chambered around. She'd spent her career saving lives at sea, pulling people from the water, enforcing maritime law. She'd never imagined she'd need to defend her own life on dry land. The question that gnawed at her, the one she couldn't quite answer, was simple but profound. When faced with a corrupt system, what was the right thing to do? Follow orders and procedures, even when they led to injustice, or break the rules and risk everything for a greater truth? She locked the evidence in her personal safe, set the office alarm, and headed out into the November darkness. Tomorrow she'd play the role of loyal Coast Guard captain, going through the motions while secretly working to expose the rot beneath. Tonight she'd sleep with her weapon within reach and pray she'd live to see morning. Pike Place Market buzzed with early evening energy despite the drizzle. Tourists photographed the famous pig statue, Street musicians competed for attention. Vendors called out deals on flowers and fresh fish. Ethan moved through the crowd with practiced awareness, checking reflections in shop windows, noting exits and choke points. Old habits from a life he thought he'd left behind. He spotted Agent Webb exactly where promised. Gray suit, Seattle Times, standing near Rachel the pig with the casual patience of someone who'd spent years on stakeouts. Ethan circled once more, looking for surveillance, backup teams, anything that suggested a trap. Nothing obvious, which meant either Webb was legitimate, or the people setting the trap were very good. Ethan approached from the side, keeping his hands visible. Agent Webb. The man folded his newspaper and extended a hand. Mr. Cross. Thank you for trusting me enough to show up. I know that wasn't easy. Up close, Webb had the worn edges of a career investigator. Tired eyes that had seen too much, a handshake that was firm but not aggressive. Captain Montgomery vouched for you. That counts for something. She's a good officer. Smart, principled. Exactly the kind of person who ends up in danger for doing the right thing. Webb gestured toward the market's covered section. Let's walk. Harder to eavesdrop in a crowd. They moved through the market, past stalls selling everything from handmade jewelry to organic honey. The noise provided cover. The constant flow of people made surveillance difficult. Smart tradecraft. Dr. Helen Morse was building a federal case against Cascade Industries, Webb said, his voice low. Environmental crimes, falsified EPA reports, conspiracy to conceal illegal dumping. She'd been gathering evidence for 6 months, working with me through encrypted channels. 2 days before she was scheduled to hand over her complete findings, someone killed her. And framed me for it. Very thoroughly. The evidence they planted would convince any jury. Webb's expression was grim. Which tells us 2 things. They have sophisticated resources, and they're desperate. Desperate enough to commit murder. Desperate enough to risk framing an innocent man. That level of desperation suggests the stakes are higher than just environmental fines. Ethan thought about the photos on his phone, the chemical formulas he didn't understand. What exactly was Cascade Industries dumping? That's where it gets interesting. Webb pulled out his phone, showed Ethan a document marked classified. 3 years ago, Cascade won a Department of Defense contract to dispose of chemical weapons components. Old stockpiles from Cold War programs, too dangerous to store, too politically sensitive to destroy publicly. The contract specified incineration at approved facilities on the mainland, with full documentation and EPA oversight. But they weren't doing that. We believe they were processing the material at their island facility, dumping the chemical byproducts directly into the ocean, and pocketing the difference between actual disposal costs and what the government was paying them. We're talking about tens of millions of dollars in profit, and unknowable environmental damage. Ethan felt his stomach drop. Chemical weapons. Not just industrial waste but compounds designed to kill. How much did they dump? Dr. Morse estimated at least 50 tons over 2 years. Maybe more. The ocean currents around Cascade Island are complex. Contamination could have spread hundreds of miles by now. Fishing grounds, marine sanctuaries, eventually reaching populated coastlines. Webb's voice was tight with anger. If this becomes public, if people realize what was dumped and where, we're looking at environmental disaster on a massive scale. Cascade Industries would face criminal charges, civil lawsuits that would bankrupt them, and everyone who facilitated or covered up the dumping would be implicated. Local officials, federal regulators, possibly even DoD contractors. So they killed Dr. Morse before she could expose it. And framed you to make it look like a simple murder. Crime of passion, mentally unstable veteran, case closed. No reason for federal investigators to look deeper into Cascade Industries or their operations. Webb stopped walking, met Ethan's eyes directly. Mr. Cross, you're not just a convenient scapegoat. You're the keystone holding their entire cover-up together. If you're caught and convicted, the story ends. But if you stay free, if you keep asking questions and gathering evidence, you threaten everything they've built. Which makes me a target. The most important target. They'll come after you with everything they have: lawyers, private security, possibly corrupt law enforcement. You won't be safe in Seattle, won't be safe anywhere they have reach. Webb paused. Which is why I'm offering you federal protection. Witness security, safe house, armed escort. You help us build the case, testify when we make arrests, and in return we keep you alive. Ethan studied the agent's face, looking for deception or hidden motives. He'd spent years in the military learning to read people, to assess threats and identify allies in hostile environments. Webb seemed genuine, but genuine didn't always mean trustworthy. What about Captain Montgomery? Is she getting the same protection? She's refusing it. Says leaving the island would tip off Cascade Industries and give them time to destroy evidence. She's planning to stay in place, gather what she can, and hold out until we can make coordinated arrests. Webb's expression darkened. It's brave and incredibly stupid. Dr. Morse thought she was being careful too, and look where that got her. Then I'm not going into hiding either. The decision crystallized as Ethan spoke. Jade risked everything to help me. I'm not going to hide in a safe house while she faces them alone. Mr. Cross, that's not negotiable. Ethan's voice was hard. I spent 4 years defusing bombs, Agent Webb. I'm comfortable with risk. What I'm not comfortable with is letting someone else take a bullet meant for me. Webb sighed, the sound of a man who'd argued with too many stubborn witnesses and lost every time. At least let me provide backup. Surveillance support, communications equipment, a panic button if things go sideways. I can work with that. They walked in silence for a moment, then Webb asked quietly, "Why did you move to Cascade Island, Mr. Cross? Of all the places you could have gone to recover from your service, why there?" Ethan thought about the question, about the real answer beneath the surface. Because it was quiet. Because nobody knew me or my history. Because I could disappear into the routine of daily life and maybe, eventually, figure out who I was without the uniform. He looked out at the market, at people going about their ordinary lives. Turns out you can't escape your past. It follows you wherever you go. That's not true. Your past is what trained you to survive this situation. The skills you learned, the discipline, the ability to operate under pressure, that's not baggage. That's armor. Webb handed him a business card with nothing but a phone number. Memorize this, then destroy the card. It's a direct line to me, secure and monitored 24/7. Anything happens, you call immediately. Ethan pocketed the card. What's the next move? We wait for Captain Montgomery to deliver the evidence we need, coordinate with local FBI teams, and prepare for simultaneous arrests. Cascade Industries executives, Sheriff Braddock, anyone else implicated in the conspiracy. Once we move fast and hard. No time for them to destroy evidence or flee. Webb checked his watch. Probably 36 hours until we're ready. Can you stay hidden that long? I can try. There's a hotel near here, the Cascadia Inn. Paid in cash, registered under a false name, room 412. Key is taped behind the fire extinguisher in the 4th floor stairwell. Use it, stay out of sight, and for God's sake don't do anything heroic. They parted ways in the crowd, Webb disappearing toward the waterfront while Ethan headed deeper into downtown Seattle. The city had changed since his last visit. More construction, more homeless encampments, more of everything except space to breathe. He found the Cascadia Inn wedged between a coffee shop and a vintage clothing store, its neon sign flickering in the rain. The room was exactly what he'd expected. Cheap furniture, thin walls, a view of the alley. But it was warm and dry and, most importantly, anonymous. Ethan locked the door, checked the windows, positioned the room's single chair to face the entrance. Then he sat with his phone and began documenting everything he knew. Dr. Morse's murder. The planted evidence. The chemical weapons disposal contract. GPS coordinates of contamination sites. He organized it methodically, the way he'd once written after-action reports in Afghanistan. Every detail mattered. Every connection could be the difference between justice and a cover-up that lasted decades. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Jade." New phone, secure line provided by Webb. Are you safe? He typed back. Safe for now. You. Hanging on. They ransacked the Coast Guard station, erased evidence. Found proof though. Witness came forward with documents. Everything we need to prove the conspiracy. Be careful. Webb says they're desperate. I know. Ethan. Thank you for not hiding. I know Webb offered protection. We're in this together. You don't get to be the only one taking risks. A long pause before her response. FBI raids happen in 36 hours. Just need to survive until then. Ethan stared at those words. 36 hours. A day and a half. In Afghanistan, he'd defused bombs with countdowns measured in seconds. This felt harder somehow, the slow burn of waiting, knowing that somewhere across the water, people were planning how to eliminate threats to their empire. He was about to respond when his door handle rattled. Someone was trying to get in. Ethan moved silently, pressing himself against the wall beside the door, his body coiled for action. The lock clicked. Professional work, quick and quiet. The door swung open 6 inches, stopped by the security chain Ethan had engaged. Damn it. A male voice, frustrated. Room's supposed to be empty. Check the registry again. Webb said 412. 2 men. Possibly more in the hallway. Ethan's mind raced through options. The window didn't open enough to escape through. The bathroom had no exit. The only way out was through the door, past however many people were waiting. Break the chain. We'll deal with whoever's inside. Ethan didn't wait. He grabbed the room's desk lamp, yanked the cord free, and hurled it through the window. Glass exploded outward, the crash drawing attention and, hopefully, witnesses. Then he slammed his shoulder into the door, using the chain's tension to impact whoever was on the other side. Someone grunted in pain. The door held for a moment. Then the chain snapped. Ethan burst into the hallway, saw 2 men in dark suits recovering from the door impact. Behind them, a third man was reaching for something inside his jacket. Not FBI. Wrong body language, wrong positioning. These were private security. Cascade Industries cleanup crew. Ethan kicked the nearest man's knee, heard cartilage pop. The man went down screaming. The second one threw a punch that Ethan slipped, countering with an elbow to the solar plexus. The third man had his weapon out now, a taser, not a gun. Less lethal meant they wanted him alive for questioning or disposal. Ethan grabbed the fire extinguisher from the wall mount and discharged it directly into the man's face. White powder filled the hallway, obscuring vision. He didn't wait to see the results, just ran for the stairwell, taking the steps 3 at a time as shouts echoed behind him. 4th floor, 3rd, 2nd. He heard footsteps above, more below. They'd covered multiple exits, had been waiting for him, which meant they'd known about the safe house, which meant Webb had been compromised, or the FBI had a leak, or Webb himself was working both sides. Ethan hit the ground floor, burst through the emergency exit into the alley. Rain hit his face, cold and sharp. He ran toward the street, heard a vehicle engine roar to life behind him. No time to look back, just run, blend into the crowd, disappear. A black SUV screeched around the corner, cutting off his escape. Ethan reversed direction, vaulted a chain-link fence into a construction site. The SUV's doors opened, men spilling out to give chase. 4 of them, all moving with professional coordination. He was outnumbered, unarmed, and running out of city to hide in. The construction site was a maze of equipment and half-built structures. Ethan used it all, ducked behind a backhoe, cut through a section of scaffolding, scrambled up a ladder to a second-story platform. Below, his pursuers spread out, systematically clearing each hiding spot. His phone buzzed. He risked a glance. Jade calling. He answered, keeping his voice low. Little busy right now. Where are you? Webb said you were in a safe house. Safe house was compromised. 4 men tried to grab me. I'm in a construction site off 4th Avenue, but I'm cornered. Hold on. He heard her typing then. There's a drainage tunnel that runs beneath that block. Construction crews use it for water management. If you can reach the access point, it's marked on the site plans as CS7, should be a concrete hatch. You can escape underground and come out 3 blocks away. Where are you getting this information? I hacked into the city's construction database. Now stop talking and start moving. You have maybe 2 minutes before they find you. Ethan scanned the site, spotted a marker. CS6. Close. He dropped from the platform, rolled to absorb impact, and sprinted toward where CS7 should be. Behind him, someone shouted. A taser dart sparked off metal beside his head. There, a concrete hatch set into the ground, locked with a simple padlock. Ethan grabbed a piece of rebar and hammered the lock until it shattered. He yanked open the hatch, revealing a ladder descending into darkness. I've got it. Going dark for a bit. Be careful. And Ethan. Don't trust Webb. Something's wrong. Yeah. I noticed. He descended into the tunnel, pulled the hatch closed above him, and climbed down into the black. The drainage tunnel was a concrete throat that swallowed Ethan whole. Water trickled along the bottom. An inch or two of runoff that sloshed around his boots as he moved through the darkness. His phone's flashlight carved a narrow path through the black, revealing graffiti-tagged walls and the occasional rat skittering away from a light. Above him, muffled shouts. The sound of the hatch being tested. Then the shriek of metal on concrete as they tried to force it open. Ethan had jammed the locking mechanism with a piece of rebar before descending, buying himself maybe 5 minutes before they found another entrance or called in equipment. He moved quickly through the tunnel, following Jade's directions. 50 yards straight, then a right turn at the junction. The air was thick with the smell of mold and urban decay, but it was breathable. He'd been in worse places. Caves in Afghanistan where the oxygen was so thin that every breath felt like drowning. His phone buzzed with a text from Jade, checking if Webb is really FBI. Something about this doesn't add up. Ethan typed back one-handed while navigating the tunnel. He knew about the safe house. Either he's compromised or he's not who he says he is. Or he's running his own operation outside official channels. Would explain the secure phones, the off-book safe house. That was a possibility Ethan hadn't considered. Rogue agents operating without sanction, using their federal credentials as cover for something else entirely. But what? If Webb wasn't really investigating Cascade Industries, what was his angle? The junction appeared ahead, marked with faded spray paint. C3 with an arrow pointing right. Ethan took the turn, the tunnel narrowing slightly, forcing him to duck his head. The water was deeper here, almost to his ankles, flowing with purpose toward some distant drainage point. His flashlight caught movement ahead. Ethan froze, killed the light. In the darkness, he heard breathing, human, close, maybe 20 feet away. Someone was already in the tunnel. Mr. Cross. A woman's voice, unfamiliar. Please don't run. I'm here to help. That's what everyone says right before they try to kill me. If I wanted you dead, you'd be dead. I've had a clear shot for the past 30 seconds. A light flicked on, revealing a woman in tactical gear mid-40s, with short red hair and the weathered face of someone who'd spent years in the field. She held no weapon, just a tablet computer. My name is Claire Hendricks. I'm with the Department of Defense, Office of the Inspector General. We need to talk. Ethan kept his distance, his back against the tunnel wall. Show me credentials. She held up the tablet, displaying a DoD identification badge with her photo and clearance level. It looked legitimate, but so had Webb's FBI credentials, and look where that got him. Dr. Helen Morse was working for you, Ethan said. The chemical weapons disposal contract. She was investigating it from the inside. Very good. Yes, Dr. Morse was our asset. We'd been investigating Cascade Industries for 18 months, building a case for criminal prosecution and contract fraud. Helen was supposed to deliver her final report last week, but obviously that didn't happen. Claire's expression tightened. We believe there's a mole in the investigation. Someone feeding information to Cascade Industries. Possibly someone in federal law enforcement. Webb. Maybe. Or maybe he's legitimate and someone else leaked the safehouse location. Either way, you're not safe with FBI protection. which is why I'm offering you ours. Why should I trust you more than Webb? Because I'm not offering you a safe house or witness protection. I'm offering you a chance to finish what Dr. Morse started. Claire pulled up files on her tablet. Satellite imagery, intercepted communications, financial records. Cascade Industries has been dumping chemical weapons components for 2 years. The environmental damage is catastrophic and still spreading. But the criminal case is fragile. We have circumstantial evidence, witness testimony that can be discredited, documents that might be dismissed as falsified. What we don't have is direct, irrefutable proof of the dumping itself. The GPS coordinates in Dr. Morse's data. The contamination sites. Exactly. But collecting water samples isn't enough. Cascade's lawyers will argue natural contamination. Other sources, reasonable doubt. We need to catch them in the act. Document an actual dumping operation with video evidence, sensor readings, chain of custody that would hold up in federal court. She swiped to show images of Cascade Industries' facility. They conduct disposal operations every 3 weeks, always at night during the new moon when visibility is poor and satellite coverage is limited. The next window is tomorrow night, 30 hours from now. Ethan felt the pieces clicking together. You want me to go back to the island. Document the dumping. I want you to help us deploy underwater sensors at the outflow site, record the evidence we need, and get out before they realize what happened. It's dangerous, requires someone with technical expertise and steady nerves. Someone like a former EOD specialist. Claire's eyes were steady. You've already been framed for murder, Mr. Cross. Why not actually commit the crime they're accusing you of, breaking and entering a secure facility in the middle of the night? Despite everything, Ethan almost smiled. You're asking me to infiltrate a facility run by people who want me dead, on an island where the sheriff is looking for me, during a time when they'll have maximum security because they're conducting illegal operations. Yes. And if I get caught, then you'll be arrested for murder, possibly killed resisting arrest, and Cascade Industries will continue dumping chemical weapons into the ocean for years. Thousands of people will be poisoned by contaminated fish. Marine ecosystems will die. And everyone responsible will walk away rich and free. Claire's voice was hard. I won't lie to you, this is a suicide mission with minimal backup. But it's also the only way to stop them. Ethan thought about Dr. Morse, bleeding out on her laboratory floor. About Jade, staying on that island surrounded by enemies, refusing protection because someone had to gather evidence. About the 2 members of his EOD team who died in Afghanistan because he'd made a mistake, misjudged a situation, been a fraction of a second too slow. He couldn't save everyone. But maybe he could save something. What's the plan? Jade stood on the dock outside the Coast Guard station, watching the evening ferry depart for the mainland. The Cascade Dream's lights reflected off the dark water as it pulled away, carrying another load of weekend visitors back to their ordinary lives. She wondered how many of them had any idea what was happening on this island. What secrets were buried beneath the pristine natural beauty? Her phone rang. Not her official phone, the secure one Webb had provided. She answered, stepping away from the station where conversations could be overheard. Captain Montgomery, this is Claire Hendricks, DOD Inspector General's office. We need to talk about Ethan Cross and the Cascade Industries investigation. Jade's hand moved instinctively toward her weapon. How did you get this number? I gave it to Agent Webb 2 months ago when we brought him into the DOD investigation. He was supposed to coordinate with FBI resources while we handled the military contracting fraud angle. Claire's voice was clipped, professional. Except Webb's been running his own operation, making promises he can't keep, exposing assets to danger. Including you. Webb said he was FBI. He is FBI. He's also ambitious, reckless, and more interested in making a high-profile arrest than building a solid case. He pushed Dr. Morse to move faster than was safe, told her to trust local authorities who were actually on Cascade's payroll. His shortcuts got her killed. Pause. And now he's doing the same thing to you and Mr. Cross. Jade felt cold that had nothing to do with the November wind. Where's Ethan now? With me. Safe. We're planning an operation to gather definitive evidence of the illegal dumping, video documentation, sensor readings, samples collected during an actual disposal operation. It happens tomorrow night during the new moon. On the island. Yes. Which is where you come in, Captain. We need someone who knows the waters around Cascade Industries facility, someone who can navigate in the dark without running aground or alerting their security. Someone with a boat and a legitimate reason to be out on the water at night. Jade looked out at the ocean, at the dark expanse that had been her domain for 3 years. She knew every current, every shoal, every trick the water played on unwary sailors. She also knew that what Claire was asking could get her killed. The Coast Guard doesn't have jurisdiction over a DoD operation on private property. No, but we have jurisdiction over environmental crimes in maritime waters. If we can prove Cascade is dumping chemical weapons in the ocean, this becomes a joint investigation. Coast Guard, DoD, FBI, EPA, everyone with standing. The kind of case where turf wars disappear and resources flood in. Claire's voice softened slightly. I know what I'm asking, Captain. I know the risks. But Dr. Morse believed this was important enough to die for. The question is whether you believe it's important enough to risk your career and possibly your life. Jade thought about that question, the one that had been haunting her since she'd helped Ethan escape. What was worth risking everything for? Justice. Truth. The abstract principle that some things mattered more than personal safety. Or was it simpler than that? Maybe it was just about looking in the mirror and recognizing the person staring back. What do you need from me? A boat capable of coastal operations in rough seas. Navigation support to reach the outflow site without being detected. And once we're in position, security while Mr. Cross and I deploy the sensors. Claire paused. We launch at 0200 hours tomorrow. Rendezvous point is the north end of the island. Coordinates I'll send encrypted. Come alone, tell no one, and Captain? If this goes wrong, if we're caught or killed, the official story will be that you went rogue. DoD will disavow any knowledge of the operation. Understood. I'll be there. The call ended. Jade stood alone on the dock, watching the ferry's lights disappear into the distance. 30 hours until the operation. 30 hours to prepare, to make sure her affairs were in order, to write the letters that would be sent if she didn't come back. She thought about calling her sister, about saying something meaningful in case this was the last chance. But what would she say? I'm about to do something dangerous and possibly illegal to stop people from poisoning the ocean? Her sister would either think she'd lost her mind or try to talk her out of it. Better to stay silent. Better to let the work speak for itself. Jade returned to the station, where Rodriguez was completing the evening security check. Captain, everything's locked down. Though I have to say, it feels wrong leaving the place this empty. After the break-in. I know. But we can't stay here 24/7 waiting for something to happen. You and Chen go home, get some rest. I'll do a final walkthrough before I leave. Rodriguez hesitated. Captain, is everything okay? You've seemed tense all day. More than usual, I mean. Just the stress of the murder investigation. Everyone's on edge. She forced a smile. I'm fine, Rodriguez. Really? He left reluctantly, Chen following with a final backward glance. Good men, both of them. They deserved to be kept clear of what was coming. Deserved to have careers that weren't destroyed by association with her choices. Jade waited until their vehicles had left the parking lot before entering the evidence room. The USB drive Kelly had given her sat in a locked safe, along with copies of everything she'd gathered. She made one more backup, encrypted it, sent it to 3 separate cloud locations. If something happened to her, the evidence would survive. Then she went to the armory. Her service weapon was standard issue, reliable but not designed for combat operations. She added a backup piece, a tactical vest rated for small arms, extra magazines. Not regulation equipment for a Coast Guard captain. But then again, nothing about tomorrow's mission was regulation. She was loading gear into her truck when Sheriff Braddock's cruiser pulled into the parking lot. Jade's hand moved toward her concealed weapon, then forced itself to relax. Stay normal. Act natural. Show no sign of what you're planning. Braddock climbed out of his cruiser with the careful movements of a man carrying too much weight on aging knees. His expression was a mix of concern and something harder. Suspicion, maybe. Or certainty. Captain Montgomery, working late, could say the same about you, Sheriff. Yeah, well, we've got a fugitive loose somewhere and a murder to solve. Sleep's a luxury these days. He approached slowly, his hand resting near his service weapon. Not threatening, just ready. I wanted to talk to you about something. Something that's been bothering me. What's that? Security footage from the ferry terminal. The quality's not great, and the timestamp is a bit fuzzy, but there's a moment, just a few seconds, where it looks like someone moved deliberately to block the camera's view of the north loading dock. Right around the time cross would have needed to slip past our checkpoints. Jade kept her expression neutral. Fog was heavy yesterday. Could have been anything. Could have been. Or could have been someone helping a fugitive escape. Braddock's eyes were hard. I've known you for 3 years, Captain. You're smart, principled, dedicated. But you're also the kind of person who thinks she knows better than everyone else. The kind who might decide the rules don't apply when she's convinced she's right. Sheriff, if you're accusing me of something, I'm not accusing. I'm warning. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. There are people on this island with a lot invested in making sure certain stories don't come to light. People with resources, connections, willingness to do whatever it takes. If you're mixed up in something that threatens them, you need to walk away. Now, before it's too late. Is that a threat? It's advice. From someone who's been around long enough to know how these things end. Braddock's expression was almost sad. You're a good officer, Jade. Don't throw your life away for a lost cause. He returned to his cruiser and drove away, leaving Jade standing in the parking lot with her heart hammering. The warning had been clear. They knew or strongly suspected, which meant she was running out of time. She finished loading her truck and drove toward her rented house on the island's east side. The roads were dark, lit only by her headlights and the occasional porch light from houses set back in the trees. This island had been her home for 3 years, the longest she'd stayed anywhere since joining the Coast Guard. She'd learned to love its rhythms, its moody weather, the way the ocean talked differently depending on the season. Now it felt like enemy territory. Her house was a small cottage with a view of the water. Nothing fancy, but comfortable and private. She pulled into the driveway, killed the engine, and sat for a moment listening to the sound of waves on rocks. Then she saw the light inside. Someone was in her house. Jade drew her weapon and approached carefully, using cover where available, checking angles and sight lines. The front door was unlocked. She always locked it. Through the window, she could see a figure sitting in her living room, backlit by a lamp. She entered fast, weapon raised, voice sharp. Hands where I can see them. The figure raised their hands slowly. Easy, Captain. It's me. Agent Webb turned in the chair, his expression carefully neutral. We need to talk about what you're planning for tomorrow night. Jade kept her weapon trained on Webb, her finger resting alongside the trigger guard. Breaking and entering. That's a federal crime, Agent Webb. So is aiding a fugitive. Guess we're both criminals now. He made no move to stand, just sat with his hands visible and empty. I'm not here to arrest you, Captain. I'm here because Claire Hendricks is about to get you and Ethan Cross killed, and someone needs to stop that from happening. How do you know about Claire's operation? Because I've been investigating her for the past 6 months. Claire Hendricks isn't DOD Inspector General. She's a contractor working for a private intelligence firm called Sentinel Solutions. They provide security consulting to corporations facing federal investigations, which is a fancy way of saying they help criminals destroy evidence and eliminate threats. Jade's weapon didn't waver. You're lying. Am I? Webb pulled out his phone slowly, tossed it onto the coffee table between them. Check it yourself. Real DOD credentials for Claire Hendricks show she retired 8 years ago. The woman using her identity now is someone else. Probably former military or intelligence, definitely skilled enough to pass as legitimate. She's been running interference on the Cascade Industries investigation since Dr. Morse started getting close to real evidence. Jade picked up the phone with her free hand, keeping her eyes on Webb. The screen showed personnel files, service records, retirement documents for the real Claire Hendricks, who was currently living in Arizona and bore only passing resemblance to the woman Ethan had met. If you knew this, why didn't you warn us sooner? Because I needed proof and I needed to see how far the conspiracy went. Cascade Industries has corrupted local law enforcement, federal contractors, possibly even elements of DoD procurement. I couldn't trust anyone inside the official channels. Webb's voice was bitter. So I went off-book. Set up the safe house without logging it through FBI systems. Gave you secure phones that weren't monitored by anyone except me. Tried to keep you and Cross alive long enough to gather evidence the right way. The safe house was compromised because someone inside Sentinel Solutions tracked Cross despite my precautions. They're good, Captain. Very good. Which is why Claire's plan for tomorrow night is suicide. He leaned forward slightly. She's not going to help you document illegal dumping. She's going to lure you and Cross to an isolated location and eliminate you both. Make it look like Cross killed you during an escape attempt, then committed suicide rather than face capture. Case closed, investigation ended. Jade lowered her weapon slowly. Everything Webb said made a terrible kind of sense. The rushed timeline, the minimal backup, the off-books nature of the operation. Classic hallmarks of a trap. But something still didn't add up. If you're really FBI, why did you approach me through encrypted channels instead of official ones? Why all the secrecy? Because there's a mole in the FBI Seattle field office. Someone feeding information to Cascade Industries. Someone high enough to access case files and surveillance reports. I've been trying to identify them for months, but they're careful. Too careful. Webb stood slowly, his hands still visible. So I've been running my own investigation, parallel to the official one, using assets the mole doesn't know about. You, Dr. Morse before she was killed, a few trusted contacts in other agencies. Building a case brick by brick. Show me your real credentials. Not just a badge, your full file, assignment history, supervisors I can verify. Webb pulled out a leather wallet, handed it over. Inside was an FBI identification card, but also business cards, photos of what looked like family, the accumulated detritus of a real life. Jade photographed everything with her phone, sent it to a contact she had at FBI headquarters, a friend from her academy days who'd gone into federal law enforcement. It'll take a few hours to verify, she said. Until then, you stay where I can see you. Fair enough. Webb settled back into the chair. While we wait, let me tell you what I think is really happening tomorrow night. Ethan sat in the back of a nondescript van, studying the tactical plans Claire had laid out on a portable screen. The Cascade Industries facility was a hardened target. Security cameras, motion sensors, armed guards on patrol. The outflow pipe where they'd deploy the sensors was on the facility's perimeter, accessible from the water but visible from multiple guard stations. We'll approach from the north using a rigid inflatable boat, Claire explained, her finger tracing routes on the satellite imagery. Captain Montgomery will navigate us to the deployment point. You'll have approximately 15 minutes to install the sensors before the next guard rotation passes the sector. 15 minutes isn't much time. It's what we have. The sensors are pre-calibrated, just need to be attached to the pipe and activated. Your EOD experience makes you uniquely qualified for precision work under time pressure. She pulled up technical specifications. Each sensor package weighs about 40 pounds, needs to be placed at specific depths to capture the full range of contamination. 3 packages total, so 3 separate dives. Ethan studied the water depth readings. 40 feet at the pipe location, strong currents, near zero visibility at night. I'll need proper dive gear, dry suit, redundant air supplies, underwater lights. Already arranged. We've got a complete diving kit ready, top-of-the-line equipment. Claire swiped to show more imagery. Once the sensors are deployed, they'll record continuously for 72 hours. Video, chemical analysis, GPS timestamps. Evidence so clean that Cascade's lawyers won't be able to dismiss it. And if their security spots us? Then we abort and try again another time. This isn't a suicide mission, Mr. Cross. I'm not asking you to die. I'm asking you to be smart and careful and maybe a little lucky. She met his eyes. Can you do this? Ethan thought about the question, about all the missions he'd run in Afghanistan where smart and careful and a little lucky was the difference between coming home and being shipped back in a box. He'd been good at his job, right up until the day he wasn't. The day his luck ran out and his team paid the price. I can do it, he said. But I want Captain Montgomery pulled back. She doesn't need to be on that boat. You and I can handle this alone. We need her navigation expertise and her official authority as Coast Guard. If we're spotted, she provides legitimacy, a routine patrol, equipment checks, anything to buy us time to disappear. Claire's expression was sympathetic but firm. I know you want to protect her, but she's not a civilian. She's a trained officer who knew the risks when she signed on. She's risking her career, her life. So are you. So am I. That's what happens when you stand up against powerful people who've built empires on corruption and violence. Claire closed the laptop. Get some rest. We launch in 22 hours, and you'll need every bit of strength and focus you can muster. The van was parked in a warehouse south of Seattle, one of dozens of anonymous industrial buildings where nothing remarkable ever seemed to happen. Ethan had a sleeping bag, MREs, water, everything except peace of mind. He pulled out his phone, the secure one Jade had given him. No new messages. She was probably busy preparing for the operation, gathering gear, making sure her boat was ready for midnight waters. He started to text her, then stopped. What would he say? Be careful. Don't trust anyone. I'm sorry I dragged you into this. All of it true, none of it helpful. Instead, he pulled up the photos from Dr. Morse's lab, studied them again with tired eyes. The chemical formulas, the GPS coordinates, the handwritten note about not trusting local authorities. A woman's entire investigation, her final warning to the world, preserved in pixels on a phone. He wondered what her last moments had been like. Had she known her killer? Had she realized the trap before it was too late? Or had she died still believing that truth and justice would prevail, that someone would carry on her work? A sound behind him made Ethan turn fast, his body tensing for combat. Claire stood in the warehouse entrance, her expression grim. We have a problem. Someone just tried to access our secure communications network. Professional work, sophisticated penetration attempt. They didn't get through, but they know we're here. Who? Could be Cascade's security contractors. Could be corrupt law enforcement. Could be whoever killed Dr. Morse. She pulled out her phone. We need to move locations. Now, grab your gear. Ethan was already moving. Years of military training overriding exhaustion and uncertainty. He had his backpack loaded in 30 seconds, was following Claire to a different vehicle parked in the shadows. A black SUV with tinted windows and enough engine under the hood to outrun most pursuit. They were pulling out of the warehouse when Ethan saw it, a flicker of movement on a rooftop across the street. Sunlight glinting off glass. The unmistakable profile of a rifle scope. Sniper. He grabbed Claire's shoulder, pulled her down as the windshield exploded inward. Glass fragments peppered them, the crack of the rifle shot echoing through the warehouse district. Claire floored the accelerator, the SUV fishtailing as it rocketed toward the street. Another shot punched through the rear window, close enough that Ethan felt the pressure wave. They were being targeted by a professional. Someone who knew their location, their vehicle, their route. How did they find us? Claire's voice was tight, her hands steady on the wheel despite the chaos. You tell me. This was your safe location. It should have been secure. Unless, she cut herself off, swerving through an intersection as traffic scattered. Unless someone on our side is compromised. Webb's warning echoed in Ethan's mind. Sentinel Solutions. Private contractors. Claire isn't who she says she is. Ethan's hand moved to his door handle. Stop the car. What? Stop. The car. His voice was hard. Right now, or I jump out at speed. Claire hit the brakes, the SUV screeching to a halt in a loading zone. They were in Seattle's industrial district, surrounded by warehouses and shipping containers. No civilians close enough to be endangered by what came next. Ethan opened his door, stepped out with his hands visible. Show me your real DoD credentials. The ones with biometric verification, not just a badge that could be faked. Claire's expression flickered, surprise, calculation, something harder underneath. Mr. Cross, this isn't the time. It's exactly the time. Because Agent Webb told Captain Montgomery that you're not DoD Inspector General. That you're a contractor working for Sentinel Solutions, hired to eliminate threats to Cascade Industries, which would include me and Jade. Webb is lying. He's the compromised agent, the one feeding information to. Then prove it. Show me credentials that can be verified independently. Let me call DoD headquarters and confirm your identity. Ethan's voice was steady. Or admit what you really are and let me walk away. For a long moment, Claire just looked at him. Then she smiled, a cold expression that never reached her eyes. You were always too smart for your own good, Mr. Cross. Dr. Morse was the same way. Couldn't just accept the simple explanation, always digging deeper. So Webb was right. Webb is a relic who doesn't understand how the world works anymore. Cascade Industries isn't some cartoon villain polluting the ocean for fun. They're disposing of chemical weapons that the government didn't want to deal with properly. Weapons that would cost billions to eliminate through official channels, that would generate headlines and investigations and political fallout. She leaned back in her seat, relaxed now that pretense was dropped. My employers provided a solution. Clean, efficient, profitable. Everyone wins. Except the people being poisoned by contaminated water. Acceptable losses. The real crime would be letting those weapons sit in aging storage facilities until they leak or explode and kill thousands. Her voice was matter-of-fact, discussing logistics rather than lives. Dr. Morse didn't see the bigger picture. Neither does Captain Montgomery. Neither do you. So the plan for tomorrow night was to get you and the captain in one place where you could be eliminated quietly. Captain Montgomery's boat would have experienced a tragic accident. Engine fire, explosion, 2 casualties. Your bodies burned beyond recognition, case closed. Claire pulled out a weapon, compact, professional. But plans change. Since you're so determined to make this difficult, we'll do it the messy way. Ethan was already moving, diving behind a shipping container as the first shot rang out. The bullet sparked off metal inches from where his head had been. He ran, using the maze of containers for cover, Claire's footsteps steady behind him. He had no weapon, no backup, no clear escape route. Just the skills drilled into him by years of training and the desperate need to survive long enough to warn Jade. His phone was still in his pocket. If he could get clear for 30 seconds, just 30 seconds to make a call. Another shot, closer this time. Claire was hurting him, driving him toward a section of the industrial area with fewer containers, less cover. She was good, professional, methodically eliminating his options. Ethan spotted a drainage grate ahead, the same kind he'd used to escape the construction site. He sprinted for it, slid the last few feet, and yanked up the grate with strength born of pure adrenaline. Dropped into darkness as another bullet sparked off the metal above him. He was in the Seattle drainage system again, running through tunnels that all looked the same, his phone's flashlight his only guide. Behind him, he heard the grate being lifted, heard Claire dropping into pursuit. He ran until his lungs burned, until his legs threatened to give out. Then he found a junction with multiple branches and chose one at random, praying it led somewhere other than a dead end. His phone had signal, barely. 1 bar, flickering. He pulled up Jade's number, pressed call. She answered on the first ring. Ethan. Claire's not DoD. She's with Sentinel Solutions, trying to kill us. Tomorrow night is a trap. Don't. The signal dropped. Ethan stared at the phone, willing it to reconnect, but the tunnel had swallowed the last bar of coverage. Behind him, A flashlight beam probed the darkness. Claire was close, and Ethan was out of places to run. Jade listened to the dead phone, her heart hammering. Ethan's voice had been cut off mid-warning, but she'd heard enough. Claire was the threat, not Webb. The entire operation planned for tomorrow night was an execution disguised as evidence gathering. She turned to Webb, who'd been listening to the one-sided conversation. "We need to find him. Now." Already on it. Webb was typing on his laptop, accessing systems that should have required warrants and oversight. Cross's phone pinged a cell tower in the industrial district before going dark. Drainage system, probably. He's used it before to escape. I've got traffic cameras, security feeds, anything that might show where he entered. Why would Claire want to kill him now? She needs him alive to lure me into position tomorrow. Because he figured out who she was. She can't let him warn you, can't let him expose the trap. Webb pulled up a map, marked locations with red dots. These are possible entry points to the drainage system in that sector. If we move fast, we can intercept him before Claire does. Jade grabbed her jacket and weapon. "Let's go." They took Webb's car, an unmarked sedan that looked like every other government vehicle but handled like something much more expensive. Webb drove with practiced efficiency, navigating Seattle traffic while simultaneously coordinating with contacts Jade couldn't identify. "I've got FBI tactical teams standing by," he said. "But they're 30 minutes out, and Cross doesn't have 30 minutes. It's going to be just us until backup arrives. Then it's enough." Jade checked her weapon, chambered around. "Where did you say the cell tower ping originated?" "South Seattle, near the old industrial waterfront. But Captain, there's something you need to understand." Webb's voice was grim. "Claire Hendricks, or whoever she really is, has killed before. Multiple times. She's not going to surrender, not going to let herself be arrested. If we find her, this ends in blood. Then we'd better make sure it's her blood, not ours." They reached the industrial district as twilight faded to full dark. The area was largely abandoned at this hour. Warehouses closed, shipping containers locked, just the occasional security guard making rounds. Webb parked near a drainage access point and pulled out tactical gear. Flashlights, communication radios, a backup weapon he handed to Jade. Glock 19. 17 rounds. Use it if you have to. Jade had trained with multiple weapons during her Coast Guard career, but she'd never fired at a human target. Never had to make the split-second decision between someone else's life and her own. She hoped tonight wouldn't be the first time. They descended into the drainage system, into the echoing concrete darkness where water whispered and shadows moved. Webb took point, his weapon and flashlight moving in practiced synchronization. Jade followed, senses hyper-alert for any sign of Ethan or Claire. The tunnel branched ahead, 3 directions. No obvious indicators of which way their targets had gone. Webb knelt, examined the ground. Water flow patterns suggest recent disturbance this way. Someone running, maybe 2 people. They followed the trail deeper into the system, the tunnels becoming a maze of junctions and dead ends. Jade tried to maintain situational awareness, but in the darkness every sound was amplified, every shadow could be a threat. Then she heard it, a gunshot, muffled by distance and concrete, but unmistakable. They ran toward the sound, caution abandoned for speed. The tunnel opened into a larger chamber where multiple drains converged, creating a space maybe 30 feet across. And there, caught in the beam of Webb's flashlight, Ethan Cross, backed against a wall, hands raised. Claire facing him with her weapon-trained center mass. "Drop it." Webb's voice echoed through the chamber. "Federal agent. Drop your weapon." Claire didn't drop it. She pivoted smoothly, fired twice at Webb. He went down hard, crying out, his flashlight spinning across the wet floor. Jade fired without thinking, 3 shots that went wide in the darkness, hitting concrete and sending chips flying. Claire returned fire, muzzle flash strobing the chamber. Jade felt a bullet pass close enough to feel the heat, threw herself behind a concrete pillar. In the chaos, she'd lost sight of Ethan, could only hear movement and labored breathing. "Captain Montgomery." Claire's voice was calm, professional. "This doesn't concern you." Walk away now and you live. Stay and you die with Cross and Webb. Not happening. Jade's voice was steadier than she felt. You're surrounded, outgunned, and federal backup is 3 minutes out. Your best move is surrender. My best move is killing all of you before that backup arrives. Another shot, punching into the pillar near Jade's head. So let's make this quick. Movement in the darkness. Ethan, circling through the shadows, using the limited cover to close distance. Jade saw his plan immediately. Distract Claire while he got close enough to disarm her. Risky, possibly suicidal, but their only play. Jade fired again, forcing Claire to duck, giving Ethan 3 seconds. He covered the distance like lightning, crashed into Claire with the full force of his body. They went down together, grappling for the weapon, 2 trained fighters locked in desperate combat. The gun skittered across the wet floor. Jade dove for it, her fingers closing around the grip as Claire broke free from Ethan and charged. Jade raised the weapon, sighted down the barrel at a human being for the first time in her life, and pulled the trigger. The shot echoed like thunder. Claire stumbled, caught herself against the wall, blood spreading across her shoulder. She looked at Jade with something like surprise, then at the spreading stain, then back at Jade. Good shot, she said quietly. Then collapsed. The FBI tactical team arrived 4 minutes later, flooding the drainage chamber with light and heavily armed agents securing every angle. Jade stood with her hands raised, protocol when law enforcement arrived at an active shooting scene, while paramedics rushed to treat the wounded. Webb had taken a bullet to the shoulder, but was conscious and already giving orders despite the pain. Claire was alive but unconscious. Her wound stabilized enough for transport. And Ethan sat against the wall, breathing hard, covered in drainage water and blood that wasn't his own. Captain Montgomery. The team leader approached, a woman in her 40s with the bearing of someone who'd seen too many tactical situations. Special Agent Lisa Reeves. I need you to secure your weapon and come with me for debriefing. Jade handed over the Glock, the weight of what she'd done settling onto her shoulders. She'd shot someone, actually fired a weapon at another human being and hit her target. The reality felt distant, like something happening to someone else. Is she going to make it? Jade asked. Probably. You hit her in the shoulder, missed major arteries. Clean through and through. Reeves studied Jade with sharp eyes. You ever shot anyone before? No. Well, you picked a hell of a first time. That woman you shot has warrants in 3 states, suspected in at least 4 murders related to corporate espionage and witness elimination. You saved Agent Webb's life, possibly Mr. Cross's as well. The words should have felt like vindication, like proof she'd made the right choice. Instead, Jade just felt exhausted. What happens now? Now we secure the scene, gather evidence, and try to untangle the clusterfuck that is the Cascade Industries investigation. Reeves gestured toward the tunnel entrance. But that's tomorrow's problem. Tonight, you 3 are getting medical evaluation, clean clothes, and a safe location to sleep. We've got a lot of questions, but they can wait a few hours. They emerged from the drainage system into a parking lot transformed into a command center. Emergency vehicles, FBI units, Seattle PD providing perimeter security. News helicopters circled overhead despite the late hour, their searchlights cutting through the darkness. Someone had leaked the story already. Federal agents, shootout, corporate conspiracy. By morning, it would be national news. Ethan found Jade near the ambulances, where a paramedic was checking her for injuries. You okay? I shot someone. Her voice was flat. First time I've ever done that. You shot someone who was trying to kill us. There's a difference. Is there? She looked at him, really looked at him for the first time since the chaos ended. I joined the Coast Guard to save lives, Ethan. To pull people from the water, to protect maritime resources. Not to get into gunfights in drainage tunnels. Sometimes saving lives means stopping the people trying to end them. He sat beside her, both of them filthy and shaking from adrenaline crash. I spent 4 years defusing bombs in Afghanistan. You know what I learned. The most important thing isn't the technical skill or the steady hands. It's the willingness to act when action is required. to make the hard choice and live with the consequences. What are the consequences of tonight? We're alive. Webb's alive. Claire's in custody and can be flipped to testify against Cascade Industries. Dr. Morse's death won't be in vain. He paused. Those seem like good consequences to me. Jade wanted to believe that, wanted to feel the righteousness of their actions. But mostly she just felt tired and scared and uncertain whether the person she'd been 24 hours ago would recognize the person she was now. Agent Reeves approached with bottles of water and protein bars. You two are being transported to a secure facility for debriefing. Webb's already en route to the hospital. He'll be fine, by the way. Tough old bastard's been shot 3 times in his career. Says this one barely counts. What about the evidence? Ethan asked. Everything Dr. Morse gathered, the documents showing Cascade's illegal dumping? We've got it all. Kelly Morrison, the woman who gave Captain Montgomery the USB drive, is in protective custody and singing like a canary. Combined with Claire's testimony if we can flip her, plus the documentation you photographed from Dr. Morse's lab, we've got enough to bring criminal charges against Cascade Industries and everyone involved in the conspiracy. Sheriff Braddock, Jade said. He's on their payroll. Probably others in local government too. Already being handled. FBI Seattle is coordinating with DoD Inspector General, the real one this time, to execute simultaneous arrests. By morning, we'll have 14 people in custody including Cascade's CEO, their head of security, and 3 local officials including your Sheriff Braddock. Reeves allowed herself a slight smile. This is going to be the biggest environmental crime prosecution in a decade. Your faces will be all over the news as the whistleblowers who broke it open. Jade felt her stomach drop. We can't be identified publicly. If Cascade has other contractors like Claire, if there are people who slipped through the arrests. You'll be in witness protection until the trials are complete. New identities, secure locations, full federal protection. Reeves's smile faded. I won't lie to you. Your lives as you knew them are over. Captain Montgomery, you'll never return to Coast Guard duty on Cascade Island. Mr. Cross, you can't go back to your cabin or your quiet writer's life. Everything changes now. Ethan and Jade exchanged glances. In the space of 48 hours, they'd gone from strangers to allies to fugitives to something else entirely. Partners in exposure, bound together by shared trauma and the weight of choices that couldn't be undone. How long until the arrests happen? Ethan asked. Reeves checked her watch. 4 hours. We're waiting for all teams to be in position before we move. Cascade Industries has operations across 3 states. We need to hit them simultaneously so nobody has time to destroy evidence or run. And the illegal dumping. The chemical weapons in the ocean. EPA is deploying emergency response teams at first light. They'll assess contamination levels, determine what can be remediated, and issue public health warnings for affected areas. It's going to be a mess. Possibly the largest maritime environmental disaster in U.S. history. But at least now it can be addressed instead of hidden. A black SUV pulled up, windows tinted, government plates. Your ride, Reeves said. Get cleaned up. Get some rest. Tomorrow we start the real work, depositions, grand jury testimony, building cases that will stand up in court. It's going to be a long few months. Jade and Ethan climbed into the SUV, found themselves sitting across from another agent who introduced himself as their security detail. The vehicle pulled away from the chaos, heading north toward whatever safe house the FBI had arranged. Jade stared out the window at Seattle passing by. The late-night streets, the occasional pedestrian, the ordinary world continuing while her own had been torn apart and rebuilt into something unrecognizable. She thought about her sister in Portland, her mother in Sacramento, the career she'd spent 10 years building. All of it would have to be explained, justified, defended. Do you think it was worth it? She asked quietly. Ethan was silent for a long moment. Ask me again in a year. When we know if the prosecutions stick, if the cleanup actually happens, if people are held accountable. He met her eyes. But yeah, I think it was worth it. Dr. Morse thought so too, or she wouldn't have risked everything. The safe house was a nondescript apartment in a residential neighborhood. The kind of place that could be anywhere, inhabited by anyone. 3 bedrooms, basic furniture, a refrigerator stocked with emergency supplies. Their security detail showed them the panic buttons, the reinforced door, the escape routes in case of compromise. Then they were alone. Jade took the first shower, letting hot water wash away the drainage system's filth and the smoke residue from weapons fire. She stood under the spray longer than necessary, trying to process everything that had happened. 48 hours ago, her biggest concern had been whether the ferry schedule would disrupt her weekend plans. Now she was a federal witness with a target on her back, her career in ruins, her identity about to be erased. When she emerged, she found Ethan sitting at the kitchen table, his own shower complete, wearing FBI-provided clothes that were slightly too large. He was studying his phone, scrolling through news articles that were already appearing about the arrests. "It's starting," he said. Cascade Industries CEO arrested at his home in Bellevue. Sheriff Braddock taken into custody on Cascade Island. The story's breaking faster than I expected. Jade sat across from him, accepting the coffee he'd made. "No mention of us." "Not yet. FBI's keeping our identities sealed until after the initial arraignments. But eventually it'll come out. Witnesses always do." He set down his phone. "Jade, I need to say something. Thank you. For everything. For trusting your instincts when everyone else was telling you I was guilty. For risking your career to help me escape. For being willing to shoot someone to save my life. You'd have done the same for me. Maybe. Or maybe I'd have made the smart choice and kept my head down." He smiled slightly. "Lucky for both of us, you're not that smart." Despite everything, Jade laughed. The sound felt foreign, like something she'd forgotten how to do. "My mother always said my stubborn streak would get me in trouble. Guess she was right. Your stubborn streak saved lives. There's a difference." Ethan's expression grew serious. "What happens after the trials? After witness protection and testimony and all the legal proceedings? Do we just go back to normal?" "I don't know if normal exists anymore." Jade wrapped her hands around the coffee mug, seeking its warmth. "But I hope we figure it out together. This whole thing, everything we've been through, I didn't do it alone. Neither did you. Maybe whatever comes next, we don't have to face that alone either." The words hung between them, carrying weight beyond their literal meaning. Partnership, friendship, something else that neither of them was ready to name but both could feel building in the space between crisis and resolution. Ethan's phone buzzed. He checked it, his expression shifting. "It's Agent Webb. He's out of surgery, wants to talk to us." They met Webb at a private hospital room secured by federal agents. He looked pale and tired, his shoulder heavily bandaged, but his eyes were alert and focused. "Captain. Mr. Cross. Glad you're both still breathing." "Likewise," Jade said. "How bad is it?" "I've had worse. Bullet went through clean, missed bone. I'll be back in the field in 6 weeks." He gestured to chairs beside his bed. "I wanted to talk to you both before things get crazy with depositions and media and everything else that's about to hit. There are some things you need to know." Ethan sat, his posture wary. "Like what?" "Like the fact that Cascade Industries has assets we haven't frozen yet. Offshore accounts, shell companies, international connections. Even with arrests, they're going to fight this with everything they have. The best lawyers money can buy, political pressure, attempts to discredit witnesses." Webb's voice was grim. "The people we arrested tonight are just the visible tip. There are others, investors, government officials who looked the other way, contractors who facilitated the operation. Some of them are powerful enough that they might never face charges. So we risked everything for partial justice?" Jade's voice was bitter. "We risked everything to stop the immediate threat and expose the conspiracy. The rest, making sure everyone pays, reforming the systems that allowed this to happen, that's going to take years. Maybe decades." Webb met her eyes. "I'm not going to lie and say this is a complete victory. It's not. But it's a start. And sometimes a start is all you can achieve." "What about Claire?" Ethan asked. Will she testify? Already lawyered up and refusing to cooperate. But we don't need her testimony. We've got documentary evidence, Kelly Morrison's records, your photos from Dr. Morse's lab. The case is solid enough to proceed without her. Webb shifted in his bed, wincing. What I'm more worried about is retaliation. Cascade Industries employed a lot of people who are now out of work because of this exposure. Some of them might blame you too, might decide that revenge is worth the risk. Hence witness protection, Jade said. Hence witness protection. But I want you to understand, this isn't temporary. Even after the trial's end, even after appeals and sentencing, you'll need to be careful. Change your routines, watch for surveillance, maintain the security protocols we're going to teach you. Webb's expression was sympathetic. I'm sorry. I know this isn't the outcome you hoped for. We hoped for truth and accountability, Ethan said. Looks like we're getting that, even if it costs more than we expected. A nurse appeared in the doorway. Agent Webb needs to rest. You'll have to continue this another time. They said their goodbyes and returned to the SUV, the security detail driving them back to the safe house through pre-dawn streets. Jade watched the city wake up, early commuters heading to work, delivery trucks making their rounds, the ordinary machinery of daily life grinding forward regardless of the extraordinary events unfolding in the shadows. Back at the safe house, exhaustion finally caught up with both of them. Jade fell into bed without bothering to undress properly, her body demanding rest that her mind was reluctant to allow. She lay in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the apartment settling, wondering what tomorrow would bring. Her phone buzzed, a text from her sister. Saw the news. Are you okay? Call me. Jade stared at the message, trying to figure out what to say, how to explain. Eventually she typed, I'm fine. Can't talk right now, but I'll call when I can. Love you. It felt inadequate, but it was all she could manage. In the next room, she heard Ethan moving around, probably struggling with the same inability to sleep despite overwhelming fatigue. Partners in insomnia, she thought. Partners in trauma. Partners in whatever this new life was going to be. She must have dozed eventually, because she woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of coffee. Ethan was in the kitchen, making breakfast with the efficiency of someone who'd spent years living out of military bases and temporary quarters. Morning, he said. There's coffee, eggs, toast. FBI stocked the place pretty well. Jade accepted the coffee gratefully. What time is it? 8:30. Arraignments started an hour ago. Agent Reeves texted. All 14 arrests went smoothly. No one fled or destroyed evidence. The charges are being filed as we speak. So it's really over. The immediate crisis is over. The actual work is just beginning. He set a plate of food in front of her. Reeves wants us at FBI headquarters at noon for our first round of depositions. Apparently, we're going to be spending a lot of time there over the next few weeks. Jade ate mechanically, fueling her body while her mind tried to process the new reality. No more Coast Guard station on Cascade Island. No more quiet routine of maritime patrols and safety inspections. Instead, courtrooms and depositions and federal protection details. Do you ever regret it? She asked. Getting involved, fighting back instead of just letting them frame you? Ethan considered the question seriously. Every time I close my eyes, I see Dr. Morse's body on that laboratory floor. I think about her spending months gathering evidence, working alone, knowing that exposure could get her killed. And then I think about what would have happened if I just surrendered, let myself be convicted, let her death mean nothing. He met Jade's eyes. No, I don't regret it. I regret that it was necessary, that systems failed so completely that ordinary people had to risk everything to stop a crime. But I don't regret fighting back. Good. Jade found she was smiling. Because I don't regret helping you. Even if it means my life is never the same. Maybe different isn't bad. Maybe it's just different. They finished breakfast in companionable silence, then prepared for the day ahead. Clean clothes, federal IDs, instructions on protocol and security procedures. By 11:30, they were in the SUV heading toward FBI headquarters, toward depositions and official statements and the beginning of a legal process that would consume months of their lives. The FBI building was a fortress of concrete and glass, bristling with security measures. They were escorted through multiple checkpoints, eventually arriving at a conference room where Agent Reeves waited with a team of prosecutors and investigators. "Captain Montgomery, Mr. Cross. Thank you for coming." Reeves gestured to seats at the long table. "We've got a lot of ground to cover today. Let's start with the night Dr. Morse was murdered and work forward from there." For the next 6 hours, Jade and Ethan walked through every detail. What they'd seen, heard, experienced. The discovery of Dr. Morse's body. The planted evidence. The escape on the ferry. The meeting with Webb and Claire. The shootout in the drainage tunnel. Every moment documented, recorded, cross-referenced against other evidence. It was exhausting work, reliving trauma while maintaining precision and clarity. But it was also necessary. This was how justice worked, not through dramatic confrontations or sudden revelations, but through painstaking documentation and corroboration. They broke for dinner around 7, eating sandwiches in the conference room while prosecutors discussed strategy in hushed tones. Jade felt hollowed out, scraped clean by the constant questioning. Beside her, Ethan looked equally drained. "Is it always like this?" she asked quietly. "Building a case. Yeah. It's not glamorous or exciting. It's just thorough and slow and incredibly detailed." He managed a tired smile. "But it works. This is how we make sure Cascade Industries can't wiggle free on technicalities." Agent Reeves returned to the table. "We're done for today. You both did excellent work. Your testimony is going to be crucial at trial. We'll need you back tomorrow for follow-up questions, but for tonight, go back to the safe house and rest." The security detail drove them through evening traffic, back to the anonymous apartment that was temporarily home. Jade collapsed on the couch, too tired to even consider showering or changing clothes. Ethan sat beside her, equally exhausted. "You know what I keep thinking about?" "What?" "How weird it is that 48 hours ago, we were strangers. I knew your name because you were the Coast Guard captain everyone talked about. You knew mine because I was the guy under investigation for murder. And now..." He gestured at the apartment at their shared isolation. "Now we're in this together. Whatever this is. Partners," Jade said. "Witnesses. Survivors. Friends." She considered the word, testing its weight. "Yeah. Friends." They sat in comfortable silence, two people bound together by extraordinary circumstances, neither certain what came next but both committed to facing it together. Outside, Seattle continued its evening routines, oblivious to the quiet revolution happening in federal courtrooms and witness safe houses. The work of exposing corruption, of holding powerful people accountable, of making sure Dr. Helen Morse's death counted for something. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't glamorous. But it was justice, slow and methodical and absolutely necessary. And for now, that was enough. 6 months later, the federal courthouse in Seattle was packed for the final day of testimony in United States versus Cascade Industries. Jade sat in the witness waiting room, her hands folded in her lap, wearing the civilian clothes she'd grown accustomed to during her time in witness protection. No more Coast Guard uniform. No more captain's insignia. Just Jade Montgomery, private citizen and star witness in the biggest environmental crime prosecution in decades. Ethan sat beside her, his presence steady and calming. Over the past 6 months, they'd spent countless hours together. In depositions, in safe houses, in the strange liminal space of people whose old lives had ended but whose new lives hadn't quite begun. They'd learned each other's habits, quirks, fears, had become something more than friends but hadn't quite figured out what to call it yet. "You ready?" he asked quietly. "As ready as I'll ever be." She'd testified twice already during the trial, but today was different. Today was closing arguments, the final chance for prosecutors to make their case before the jury deliberated. Her testimony would be referenced, dissected, used as evidence of conspiracy and cover-up. "How about you?" "I testified last week. My part's done. Now I'm just here for moral support." He smiled slightly. And to make sure you don't decide to run off to Mexico instead of finishing this. The thought crossed my mind. But she was smiling too, some of the tension easing. Agent Reeves says the prosecution's case is solid. All 14 defendants facing serious charges. Enough evidence that even their expensive lawyers can't create reasonable doubt. Doesn't mean they won't try. Through the waiting room window, Jade could see the courthouse steps where protesters had gathered, environmental activists demanding justice, Cascade Industry supporters claiming the prosecution was a witch hunt, media crews capturing every angle. The trial had become a national story, a symbol of corporate corruption and environmental destruction. Dr. Helen Morse's face was on magazine covers. Her story told in documentaries and podcasts. She'd become a martyr for environmental protection, her death galvanizing a movement. Jade wasn't sure how she felt about that. Glad that Helen's work mattered, that her sacrifice wasn't forgotten. But uncomfortable with the lionization, the way complex reality got simplified into heroic narratives. Helen had been a scientist doing her job, not a crusader seeking martyrdom. She deserved to live to see the fruits of her investigation, to grow old and retire and die peacefully decades from now. Instead, she died at 53, alone in her laboratory, killed by people who valued profit over human life. The waiting room door opened. Agent Reeves stepped in, her expression professionally neutral. "Captain Montgomery, they're ready for you." Jade stood, smoothed her clothes, took a deep breath. Ethan squeezed her hand briefly, a gesture of support, of solidarity. Then she followed Reeves into the courtroom. The space was imposing. High ceilings, dark wood paneling, the seal of the United States mounted above the judge's bench. The jury box held 12 ordinary citizens who'd spent 6 weeks listening to testimony about chemical weapons, illegal dumping, conspiracy to conceal environmental crimes. They looked tired, overwhelmed by the technical complexity and moral weight of what they'd heard. The prosecution table was crowded with federal attorneys from multiple agencies: FBI, EPA, Department of Justice. The defense table had equally expensive lawyers, sleek and confident despite the mountain of evidence against their clients. And in the gallery, Cascade Industries executives sat in their suits, faces carefully neutral, as if this were just another business meeting rather than a trial that could send them to prison for decades. Jade took her seat in the witness box, was sworn in, and faced the chief prosecutor, a woman named Rachel Kim who'd spent 20 years prosecuting corporate crime and had the reputation for being relentless. "Captain Montgomery," Kim began, her voice carrying clearly through the courtroom, "can you tell the jury about the morning of November 22nd, when you first encountered Mr. Ethan Cross?" Jade had told the story so many times it felt like reciting a script, but she kept her voice steady, her details precise. She described the manhunt, the ferry terminal, the moment she'd decided to help rather than arrest. The prosecution had initially worried that admitting she'd aided a fugitive would undermine her credibility, but Kim had turned it into a strength. Evidence of moral courage, of choosing justice over blind obedience to corrupt authority. "And why did you make that decision?" Kim asked. "Why risk your career to help a man you believed might be a murderer?" "Because something didn't add up," Jade said. "The evidence was too perfect, too convenient. In my experience, real crimes are messy. This felt staged. And then I learned that Dr. Morse had specifically said she couldn't trust local authorities. That made me wonder who she was afraid of and why." Kim walked her through the discovery of the conspiracy. Kelly Morrison's testimony, the document showing falsified disposal reports, the revelation that Cascade Industries had been dumping chemical weapons components into the ocean for 2 years. Each piece of evidence was introduced, authenticated, entered into the record. Then came the cross-examination. The defense attorney was a man named Marcus Holloway, expensive suit and practice charm, the kind of lawyer who could make juries forget about inconvenient facts. "Captain Montgomery, you've admitted to helping a fugitive escape custody. You've admitted to conducting an unauthorized investigation outside your jurisdiction. You've admitted to making decisions based on what you call gut feelings rather than evidence. Is that correct?" "In essence, yes." "So you're asking this jury to believe that your gut feelings are more reliable than the evidence collected by trained law enforcement officers. Your personal judgment superior to official procedures and protocols." I'm asking the jury to consider all the evidence, including the fact that those trained law enforcement officers were on Cascade Industries' payroll." "Objection," Holloway said immediately. "Inflammatory and prejudicial." "Sustained," Judge Martinez said. "The jury will disregard that comment." But the damage was done. The jury had heard it, would remember it even if they were instructed to forget. Kim had coached Jade on this. Sometimes the most important testimony was the stuff that got objected to. Holloway continued his attack, trying to paint Jade as a rogue agent who'd violated protocol and manufactured evidence to justify her actions. But Kim's redirect was devastating, walking through the chain of evidence that proved Cascade's crimes beyond any reasonable doubt. By the time Jade stepped down, the jury looked convinced. She returned to the waiting room, where Ethan was watching the proceedings on closed-circuit television. "You did great," he said. "Holloway barely laid a glove on you. It doesn't matter how I did. It matters whether the jury believes the evidence." "They will." "How could they not? We've got documentary proof, eyewitness testimony, scientific analysis of the contamination. This isn't a close case." Jade wanted to believe that, but 6 months of living in the legal system had taught her that nothing was certain until the jury returned with a verdict. They spent the next 2 days in limbo, waiting for closing arguments, waiting for jury instructions, waiting for deliberations. The safe house felt smaller than ever, the walls closing in. Jade found herself going for long walks despite the security detail's protests, needing movement and open air after months of confinement. On one of those walks, she and Ethan ended up at a waterfront park, watching ferries cross the Sound. The same ferries that connected Seattle to the islands, including Cascade Island. Jade hadn't been back since the day she'd helped Ethan escape. Her belongings from the Coast Guard station had been packed and shipped, her resignation accepted without comment. The island continued without her, probably relieved to be free of the woman who'd exposed their corruption. "Do you miss it?" Ethan asked, following her gaze. "The island, the Coast Guard, the life you had before?" "Sometimes. Mostly I miss the simplicity. Knowing who I was, what my purpose was. Now." She gestured vaguely. "Now I'm unemployed, living under federal protection, waiting to find out if my testimony actually matters." "It matters. Even if the jury somehow finds everyone not guilty, even if justice fails this time, what you did still matters. Dr. Morse's investigation is public record now. The contamination is being cleaned up. Regulations are being reformed. You changed things, Jade. We changed things. You were the one who refused to accept being framed, who fought back instead of giving up." She looked at him, really looked at him. 6 months of shared trauma had stripped away the careful distance people usually maintained. She knew his nightmares, his guilt about Afghanistan, his fear that he'd never be able to live a normal life again. And he knew hers, the burden of command, the weight of responsibility, the secret fear that she'd never be enough. "What happens after the verdict?" she asked. "After the trial ends and witness protection ends and we're released back into the world?" "I don't know. The FBI said they'd help with new identities if we want them. Fresh starts somewhere far from Seattle. Or we could stay here, rebuild in a city that knows our faces but might respect what we did." He paused. "What do you want to do?" "I want to go back to the Coast Guard. I want to captain a station somewhere quiet where the biggest emergency is a capsized sailboat. I want normal and boring and uncomplicated." She smiled sadly. "But I don't think that's possible anymore." "Maybe not. But maybe something better is possible. Something neither of us planned but both of us need." Before Jade could ask what he meant, her phone rang. "Agent Reeves. The jury's reached a verdict. You need to get back to the courthouse immediately." The courtroom was electric with tension. Media packed the gallery, cameras ready to capture every reaction. The defendants sat rigid, their lawyers whispering last-minute encouragements. And the jury filed in with expressions that revealed nothing. Judge Martinez called the court to order. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" The foreman stood, a middle-aged man who'd been a high school science teacher before retirement. "We have, Your Honor." Please deliver your verdict to the bailiff. The slip of paper made its way from foreman to bailiff to judge. Martinez read it without expression, then handed it back to the foreman. Please read the verdict for the record. In the matter of the United States versus Cascade Industries, on the count of conspiracy to violate environmental protection laws, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of illegal disposal of hazardous materials, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of conspiracy to commit murder in the death of Dr. Helen Morse, we find the defendant guilty. The litany continued. 14 defendants, multiple counts each, guilty verdict after guilty verdict. By the time the foreman finished, the defense table looked like it had been hit by a bomb. The prosecution looked grimly satisfied. And in the gallery, environmental activists were crying with relief. Justice had been served. Imperfect, slow, complicated justice, but justice nonetheless. Judge Martinez banged her gavel over the rising noise. The court thanks the jury for their service. Sentencing will be scheduled for 6 weeks from today. Defendants will remain in custody pending sentencing. This court is adjourned. Outside the courthouse, Jade and Ethan were mobbed by reporters. Questions flew from every direction. How did it feel? Would they do it again? What were their plans now? Agent Reeves and the security detail extracted them efficiently, loading them into the SUV and away from the chaos. But as they drove through Seattle, Jade found herself smiling. Actually smiling for the first time in months. We did it. Yeah. Ethan was smiling too. We actually did it. Guilty on all counts. That's got to be close to a record for corporate criminal prosecution. Federal prison for the executives, millions in fines for the company, cleanup costs that will bankrupt them, and precedent that might actually deter other corporations from thinking they can poison the environment without consequences. He shook his head in wonder. Dr. Morse would be proud. Agent Reeves turned from the front seat. You should both be proud. What you did, standing up when it was dangerous, testifying when it was difficult, refusing to back down despite threats and intimidation, that's what makes the system work. Not perfectly, not always, but sometimes. When people like you are willing to risk everything. Back at the safe house, they found champagne waiting, a gift from the prosecution team. Jade poured 2 glasses, raised hers in a toast. To Dr. Helen Morse. To justice. To surviving long enough to see it through. They drank, the bubbles sharp and celebratory. Then Ethan raised his glass again. To partners. To whatever comes next. To building something new out of the wreckage of everything we lost. Their glasses clinked, the sound clear and bright in the quiet apartment. 3 months later, Jade stood on the deck of a small Coast Guard cutter off the coast of Oregon, breathing salt air and watching the sun set over the Pacific. After the trial, after the sentencing, after witness protection had officially ended, she'd applied for reinstatement to the Coast Guard. The process had been complicated. Congressional hearings about her actions, internal investigations, endless paperwork. But eventually, admirals who understood that sometimes doing the right thing meant breaking the rules had approved her return to active duty. Not as a captain. Not at her old station. But as a lieutenant commander at a small facility in Oregon, working maritime safety and environmental protection. It was a demotion in rank but a promotion in purpose. She'd never be satisfied with routine patrols again, not after everything she'd seen. Now she inspected facilities, investigated potential violations, made sure that what happened with Cascade Industries never happened again on her watch. It wasn't the life she'd planned, but it was a life she could be proud of. Her phone rang. Ethan. Hey, stranger, she answered. How's the writing going? Slow. Turns out writing a book about environmental crime and corporate corruption is harder than I expected. He'd spent the past 3 months working on a memoir, documenting everything that had happened. Multiple publishers had expressed interest. The story was too good, too timely, too important not to be told. But I'm making progress. Should have a draft finished by next month. Good. The world needs to hear this story. All of it. Speaking of which, I've been thinking. That dinner invitation you mentioned last time we talked, is it still open? Jade smiled. Absolutely. When can you get to Oregon? This weekend. I could drive down Friday, stay through Sunday if you're free. I'm free. And Ethan. It'll be good to see you. You too, Jade. You too. The call ended. Jade stood on the deck a while longer, watching the sun paint the water in shades of gold and amber. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the choices made in crisis, the bridges burned, the new foundations built from ash and determination. She thought about Dr. Helen Morse, whose sacrifice had sparked a revolution in environmental protection. She thought about Ethan Cross, who'd refused to accept injustice even when it would have been easier to surrender. She thought about the 12 jurors who'd looked at the evidence and chosen truth over comfort. And she thought about herself, the Coast Guard captain who'd trusted her instincts, broken the rules, and discovered that sometimes the most important duty was to conscience rather than protocol. The Pacific Ocean stretched to the horizon, vast and powerful and worth protecting. Whatever came next, whether it was romance with Ethan or just friendship, whether it was continued service or something entirely new, Jade knew she'd face it the same way she'd faced everything else. With courage. With integrity. With the absolute certainty that some things were worth fighting for, even when the cost was everything you'd built. Behind her, the cutter's horn sounded. A call to duty, to the next patrol, to the endless work of keeping people safe and holding the powerful accountable. Jade turned from the sunset and returned to work. 5 years later, a small ceremony was held at the rebuilt Marine Research Facility on Cascade Island. The building had been purchased by a coalition of environmental organizations after Cascade Industries' assets were liquidated. Now it served as the Dr. Helen Morse Center for Ocean Conservation, a working laboratory, educational facility, and memorial to the woman whose investigation had changed everything. Jade stood in the crowd, wearing her Coast Guard uniform with the captain's insignia she'd earned back through years of exemplary service. Beside her, Ethan held her hand, his wedding ring catching the afternoon light. They'd married 2 years ago, a quiet ceremony with just a few friends and family. Two people who'd been bound together by crisis and discovered they preferred partnership to solitude. Agent Webb spoke at the podium, his shoulder completely healed, his career burnished by the successful prosecution of Cascade Industries. He talked about Helen's dedication, her courage, her unwavering commitment to truth. In the front row, Helen's sister wept quietly. Her family hadn't known the danger Helen faced, hadn't understood the stakes until it was too late. Kelly Morrison spoke next, the whistleblower who'd provided crucial documentation. She'd spent 2 years in witness protection before emerging to work as an environmental consultant, helping other corporations avoid the mistakes Cascade had made. Her daughter, now 10, sat in the audience, old enough to understand what her mother had risked, proud of the courage it had taken. Then they unveiled the plaque at the facility's entrance. Dr. Helen Morse Center for Ocean Conservation. The sea, once it casts its spell, holds one in its net of wonder forever. In memory of Dr. Helen Morse, 1972 to 2024. Scientist, advocate, hero. Jade felt tears on her cheeks and didn't bother wiping them away. 5 years had passed, but the memory of finding Helen's body was still vivid. The waste of it, the senseless destruction of a brilliant life because she dared to speak truth to power. But Helen's death hadn't been meaningless. The laws had changed because of her investigation. Stronger EPA enforcement, criminal penalties for corporate executives who violated environmental regulations, whistleblower protections for people like Kelly who came forward with evidence. Cascade Industries executives were serving long prison sentences. Sheriff Braddock had died in federal custody, his corruption exposed for all to see. And the ocean around Cascade Island was healing. Slowly, painfully slowly, but healing. Fish populations were recovering. Toxic algae blooms had decreased. The dead zone near the outflow pipe was beginning to show signs of life. It wasn't a complete victory. Some contamination would persist for decades. Some damage was irreversible. But it was progress, hard-won and precious. After the ceremony, Jade and Ethan walked along the shore, following paths they'd both taken 5 years earlier under very different circumstances. The island looked the same, rocky beaches, dense forests, the constant sound of waves. But it felt different now. Cleaner somehow. Like a place that had confronted its sins and chosen redemption. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd arrested me that first day? Ethan asked. If you'd followed orders instead of trusting your instincts? All the time, Jade admitted. You'd probably be in prison. Helen's investigation would have died with her. Cascade Industries would still be dumping chemical weapons. Everything would be worse. Or maybe someone else would have figured it out eventually. Maybe the truth would have emerged through different channels. Maybe. But I'm glad it was us. I'm glad we were the ones who fought back. She stopped walking, turned to face him. Do you have regrets? About any of it? Ethan thought about the question seriously, the way he always did. I regret that Helen died. I regret that it took violence and corruption and a near miss with our own deaths to achieve justice. But do I regret fighting back? No. Never. Good. Jade kissed him, tasting salt air and shared history. Because I don't either. They continued walking, two people who'd been strangers once, who'd been thrown together by crisis and chosen to stay together by design. Partners in the truest sense, equals who supported each other, challenged each other, made each other better. In the distance, the ferry horn sounded. The Cascade Dream, still making its runs between island and mainland, still carrying people to and from their lives. Jade thought about the passenger who'd recognized Ethan 5 years ago, the old woman who'd said that if he was innocent, being caught would be the real crime. She'd been right. But more than that, she'd identified the central truth. Sometimes the system failed, and when it did, ordinary people had to step up and make things right. That was what Jade and Ethan had done. What Dr. Helen Morse had tried to do before her death cut short her work. What Kelly Morrison and Agent Webb and 12 jurors and countless others had done in their own ways. Standing up. Speaking truth. Refusing to accept that power and money could triumph over justice and integrity. It wasn't glamorous work. It was hard and dangerous and cost more than anyone wanted to pay. But it mattered. In the end, it was the only thing that really mattered. Jade's phone buzzed, a message from her commanding officer about next week's inspection schedule. Routine work, the unglamorous day-to-day of environmental protection. Exactly what she'd signed up for, exactly what she loved. Ready to head back? Ethan asked. Ready. They turned toward the ferry terminal, toward the boat that would carry them back to the mainland, back to their lives in Oregon where both of them had found purpose after chaos. The sun was setting over Cascade Island, painting the sky in shades of fire and gold. It was beautiful and peaceful and safe, a place where people could live without fear of poisoning, where the ocean could heal, where Dr. Helen Morse's sacrifice had purchased something precious and lasting. Justice, truth, accountability, and the absolute certainty that when people chose courage over comfort, when they refused to look away from difficult truths, they could change the world. One investigation at a time. One testimony at a time. One choice at a time. Jade Montgomery and Ethan Cross boarded the ferry, hand in hand, ready for whatever came next. Their story was over. But the work, the endless necessary work of protecting what mattered, would continue forever. And that was exactly how it should be. Clap or board if you made it this far. You just experienced the complete journey of Ethan and Jade, from a desperate 60-minute countdown to a 5-year fight for justice. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, made you question what you'd do in their shoes, or reminded you that ordinary people can stand up to extraordinary corruption, then I have a favor to ask. Thumbs up, hit that like button. It tells me you want more intense, dramatic stories like The 0 Hour Protocol. Every like helps this story reach someone else who needs to hear it. Bell subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next gripping tale. We're building a community of people who believe in stories about courage, justice, and the kind of choices that define who we really are. Speech balloon, drop a comment below. Would you have helped Ethan escape like Captain Montgomery did? Would you have trusted your gut over the evidence? Or would you have played it safe? I read every comment, and your thoughts inspire the next stories I create. Loudspeaker, share this video with someone who loves thrillers, military heroes, strong characters, or stories where the underdog actually wins. Let's spread stories that matter. Remember, Ethan and Jade changed their world by refusing to stay silent. You can change yours by simply engaging with content that moves you. Until the next story, stay curious, stay courageous, and never stop questioning the official narrative. Your storyteller writing hand.